It's a beautiful day here in Dallas as President and Mrs. Kennedy arrive at Love Field for what is widely regarded as the first stop on the 64 campaign trail. They are being greeted by Texas Governor John Connally and various other well-wishers. After the president leaves Love Field, he will partake in a motorcade through Dallas and then on to the Trade Mart to deliver a speech. And here comes the motorcade. President Kennedy is seated in the rear of his limousine with the First Lady on his left. It appears that something has gone wrong with the motorcade. We are receiving reports that there has been a shooting, that shots have been fired at the motorcade. The police are on the scene. We don't know if the president's been hit. We understand that Parkland Hospital has been notified.
President Kennedy was shot during today's motorcade, but is in good condition with what the doctors are calling a superficial flesh wound to his right shoulder. The president regrets that the kickoff to our 64 campaign has been marred, but vows to continue our quest for re-election next fall.
Hello, Mr. President. Here's that information about the assassination attempt you wanted from the police. This should give you a few leads for your own investigation. That was a close call you had last week. You had the family really scared. Thank God you're okay.
Thanks, Bobby. Whoever did this isn't going to get away with it. Not if I can help it.
We'll find him. I'm sure of it. You'll probably want to look through that file for a while, so I'll leave you alone.
I'll speak with you later.
Begin interview with Mrs. Kenneth Dalton. Now, Mrs. Dalton, tell us what you saw in Dealey Plaza.
Yes, well, I heard those terrible shots ring out. There seemed to be 3 or 4 shots. And as I heard the shots, I looked up at the county records building because that's where the noise was coming from. When I looked up, I saw someone or something moving in the corner window of the 5th floor. I couldn't make anything out except that there was movement. That's all I know.
Thank you for your time, Mrs. Dalton. End interview with Mrs. Kenneth Dalton. Begin interview with Elliot Balder. Now, Mr. Balder, tell us what you know about the assassination attempt.
Am I on? Okay. I know that the shots came from the county records building. My wife, my brother, and I were standing right in front of that building when the shots were fired. I'm sure they came from that building because the sound of the shots was right above us. I wish I could tell you more, but my wife and I had just come up from Austin the day before, and we were too overtaken by the whole place and all the excitement to notice anything specific.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Balder. End interview with Elliot Balder. Begin interview with Jason Alvarado. Now, Mr. Alvarado, tell us what you saw on November 22nd. I saw a rifle coming out of the window on the 5th floor of the county records building. Did you see the person who had the gun? No, I didn't. That's strange to see, but I just saw the rifle. Then I heard the shots. It was just terrible. That's all we need now. Thank you for your time, Mr. Alvarado. End interview with Jason Alvarado. Begin interview with Sarah Cavanaugh. Now, Miss Cavanaugh, just tell us now what you told us before.
Okay. Well, I guess I should start by saying that I work in the county records building. I'm a clerk there. Anyway, the week before the president came to Dallas, a man came to my desk and asked for a copy of the blueprints for the building, so I gave them to him. I really didn't think too much of it, until I heard that the shots had been fired from the records building. I think he may be the man responsible.
Can you tell us what he looked like?
He was tall, over 6 feet, and he had a sandy brown hair. And I think he had a pretty big nose. That's all I remember.
Thank you for your time, Miss Kavanaugh. End interview with Sarah Kavanaugh.
Let's get started, gentlemen. I'd like to discuss the civil rights situation.
Since you've brought it up, Mr. President, I'd like to say that personally, I don't understand why this administration is going out on a limb for a civil rights bill that has no chance of passing. I think we should go back to our original strategy, prosecuting civil rights violators and registering the Southern Negro voter.
We've tried that, Paul, and it doesn't work. We can't solve this problem one lawsuit at a time. We need legislation. And this bill can pass. We had a great reaction after the March on Washington in August. If we can continue creating positive displays of the Negro protest, we can get this bill through Congress.
Aren't you forgetting that we also have to convince a number of congressmen and senators to vote for this bill?
I haven't forgotten that, Paul. I'm just confident that we can accomplish that task as well.
Where do we stand on the civil rights bill now?
There are 7 titles in this bill. The most controversial is Title II, the Public Accommodation section. Requiring Southerners to desegregate their public restaurants and hotels won't be easy. Southerners argue that this is a state issue. They don't want the federal government mandating a change in their traditions.
Title III is also a problem. It allows the Attorney General to bring lawsuits against school districts that are not integrated. Unfortunately, most Southern whites oppose integrated schools, so this is going to be a tough title to pass as well.
Do you think we're going to see an escalation in the violence that accompanies some of the protests?
I hope not, Mr. President, but it's hard to say. Violent protests only make it more difficult for us to get this bill passed. Unfortunately, I've heard talk that some northern activists are becoming disillusioned with the peaceful protest leaders and are turning to the more radical leaders like Malcolm X and the Black Muslims.
Why do they want to get violent? It only leads to more animosity between the races.
Look at it this way, Paul. If you got washed down the street with a high-powered hose for protesting against conditions that you considered to be unjust, wouldn't you become a little angry? Wouldn't you seek a little retribution?
We've all seen footage of police with fire hoses and attack dogs, Sam, and we...
Let's get back to the point, guys. Mr. President, we're trying to keep the violence on both sides to an absolute minimum. I think that's in everyone's best interest.
That's all the information I'll need for now, gentlemen. Thank you for the update.
Tompkins.
Hello, Detective Tompkins? This is Jack Kennedy.
Hello, Mr. President. How can I help you?
I received the FBI folder on the investigation, and I was wondering if you could give me any more information.
I'm afraid that everything we know at this time is in that folder, sir. But we are constantly working to get more information.
Will you let me know if you learn anything new?
Of course, sir. The minute we learn anything new, we'll let you know.
Thank you for your time, Detective.
Hello?
Hello, Ms. Kavanaugh. This is Kevin Brudeman with the Dallas Police. I have a few questions for you about the assassination attempt.
Okay, what would you like to know?
Is there anything new that you can add to your police statement?
Actually, I do remember one thing about him that I forgot when I was talking to you guys before, but it's kind of silly. The guy had really long eyelashes. I mean really long. They looked fake, they were so long. I guess that's not exactly what you were looking for.
Well, everything helps. Is there anything else you can tell me?
Sorry, that's it. Look, I've got to run. I've got a date tonight. Bye. Hello?
Hello, Mrs. Dalton? This is Jack Kennedy.
Billy, is that you? That's just not funny.
No, ma'am. This isn't Billy. I'm really Jack Kennedy. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about what you saw in Dealey Plaza. Would you mind talking with me, ma'am?
Oh my goodness! It's really you? I can't believe I'm talking to the President of the United States. Oh, I've got to tell Charlene.
Mrs. Dalton, please don't tell Charlene. In fact, don't tell anyone. You see, it's very important that no one know that I've called you. Can I count on you to keep my secret?
Of course, Mr. President. You can always count on me.
Thank you, Mrs. Dalton. Now, let me get to the reason I called. Is there anything you can tell me about the attempt on my life that you didn't tell the police?
Well, no. I told the police everything I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could be of more help to you.
That's all right, ma'am. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Hello?
Hello, Miss Parson. This is Kevin Brudeman with the Dallas Police. I have a few questions for you about November 22nd.
Yeah, like what?
Where were you when the shots were fired at the president?
Do you want the truth or the story Bob made me tell you guys before?
Let's try the truth.
Bob Rafkin and I were at a motel. We used to go to a motel every Friday at lunch, if you know what I mean. Anyway, when we got back to work and Bob found out what happened in his office, he just flipped. He starts making up stories about where we were, calling friends to vouch for us, yelling about his wife and what she would say if she found out about us. He fell apart. Then that toad breaks off our relationship and fires me. Now I haven't got a job or a man, if you could call Bob Rafkin a man. Look, am I going to get into trouble for lying to the police? I only did it because he made me. Then he drops me.
I think that's absolutely terrible, Miss Parson. Is there anything you can tell me that might aid in the investigation?
Nope. Like I said, I was in a motel room at the time of the shooting.
Thank you for your time, Miss Parson. Goodbye.
Hello.
Hello, Elliot Balder. This is Jack Kennedy.
Did you say Jack Kennedy? The Jack Kennedy?
Yes, Mr. Balder. This is the Jack Kennedy. I'd, like to hear what you know about the shooting.
Well, Mr. President, my wife and I were in town visiting my brother, so we went to see you and your lovely wife while you were in Dallas. We were standing right in front of the county records building when the shots were fired. I'm sure they came from that building because the sound of the shots was right above us.
Is there, anything else you can tell me?
I'm sorry, sir. I wish there were more to tell. It was just such a mass of confusion. Being from out of town and all, everything was so unfamiliar. I just don't remember much after the shots were fired. I'm sorry.
Did you see anything, unusual before you heard the shots?
Like I said, Mr. President, being from out of town, everything was unusual. But I didn't see anything that would help the investigation.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Balder. Goodbye.
And for what's happening in Vietnam, the helicopter is finally coming of age as a weapon, proving its worth time and again in the bitter South Vietnam jungle war. The chopper, as U.S. troops have nicknamed it, wins acclaim in rescue work, snatching wounded from otherwise inescapable death. The copter is able to swoop in on isolated rebel pockets, fire at the enemy, and immediately soar away to safety. And now for our final story. During his whirlwind tour of Florida, President Kennedy stopped off at Cape Canaveral long enough to inspect the Saturn I missile. The president was impressed by the Saturn's takeoff thrust of 1.5 million pounds. This rocket power that enables a 19,000-pound payload to be carried into space is an achievement that far surpasses the Russians in the race to the moon. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, this just arrived for you. I would have had it processed with your other mail, but it's labeled confidential, so I figured I would show it to you first.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. Keep up the good work.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Have a good afternoon.
Mr. President, we need to discuss the civil rights legislation. Right now, the legislation that you proposed back in June is stuck in the House Rules Committee. If we don't do something, the bill could die in that committee.
Of course, I don't want that to happen, Bobby. What do you recommend?
Since Gilbert Ornelas, the chairman of the committee, won't even hold hearings on the bill, I think you have no choice but to work around him. That means a petition to bypass the rules panel. If a majority of the House votes for the petition, we can get that bill out of committee and onto the floor for a vote.
If I may interject, Mr. President, I don't think that the discharge petition is the proper way to proceed on this matter. There are quite a few members of the House who object to bypassing committees, so you might experience difficulty with a discharge petition. I would encourage you to use your persuasive talents to influence Congressman Ornelas to hold hearings on the bill. But of course, the decision is yours.
I think I can persuade Gilbert Ornelas to hold the necessary hearings on this bill. Arthur, can you set up a time for me to speak with him?
I'd be happy to, Mr. President.
Good. Now, if there's nothing else to discuss, I'd say that this meeting is adjourned.
Strachan Investigation Agency. May I help you?
May I speak with Bill Strachan, please?
I'm sorry. He's unable to come to the phone. He's dead.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. Who am I speaking with?
This is Sylvia Hall. I was Mr. Strachan's secretary.
Maybe you can help me, Miss Hall. Is it Miss or, Mrs.?
Miss, but you can call me Sylvia. And I don't know how much I can help you. I only started working here a few weeks ago.
I understand. Just do your best. First, how did Mr. Strachan die?
He was shot. He was walking out of the building and someone just shot him. I can't believe it. They haven't caught the guy who did it either, but the police don't think it was a random killing.
Oh, that's awful. Do they have any suspects?
No, not even one.
Sylvia, do you know anything about a juggernaut or something called the camel?
No, I've never heard of them before. Sorry.
That's okay. Did, Mr. Strachan mention anything about the, Kennedy assassination attempt?
No, he didn't. Why are you asking all these questions anyway? Who is this?
I'm Jack Kennedy.
Sure you are.
No, I really am.
President Kennedy? I can't believe it.
Thanks for answering all my questions, Sylvia. Goodbye.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here's tonight's top story. Only 4 minutes after taking off from Montreal in a driving rainstorm, a Canadian 4-engine jet plunged to earth and burned. All 118 persons aboard were killed in Canada's worst air disaster. 16 other lucky persons owed their lives to the fact that they were caught in a Montreal traffic jam. They missed their flight. Pope Paul VI ended the second session of Rome's Ecumenical Council with a precedent-shattering statement. He announced that he will, quote, visit the land from whence Peter set forth, end quote. Pope Paul will be the first of his successors to return to the Holy Land. Many see the Pope's Holy Land pilgrimage as an advance for better relations among churches of all faiths. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
President, Congressman Ornelas is on line 1.
Gilbert, Jack Kennedy. How are you today?
Fine, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm, very well. Thanks for asking. How's your granddaughter, Sheila? She must be 12 by now.
She's doing just fine, Mr. President, but I find it hard to believe that you called me up just to talk about my granddaughter. What can I do for you?
Gilbert, I'd like you to hold hearings on the Civil Rights Bill.
I believe that it is my prerogative as chairman of the committee to hold hearings as I see fit, Mr. President.
That is true, Gilbert, but I would consider it a personal favor if you would just do this. What do you say?
As a personal favor to you, Mr. President, I will schedule a hearing at my earliest convenience.
Thank you, Gilbert. I do appreciate that. Goodbye. Let's get started, gentlemen. Jim, I want your read on the situation in Vietnam.
As you know, sir, the political situation is volatile. Diem's fall last month destabilized an already shaky situation. General Minh, the current president, appears uninterested in leading the country. We've heard rumors of another coup. Ambassador Reams believes the current regime could fall as early as January.
Yes, I'm aware of the, uncertainty. How would you characterize the overall U.S. effort toward turning back the communists, General?
Not good, sir. The 16,000 advisors we have in place can't do much. They are limited to training the South Vietnamese army. To complicate matters, the villages are proving to be a formidable supply line for the communists. While the country's peasants accept our help, they apparently side with the communists by providing food, shelter, and munitions.
We can't fight the whole damn country. We need the peasants on our side. What can we do? Are there any suggestions?
How about a propaganda blitz citing atrocities perpetrated on the Vietnamese people by the communists? Rumors circulated by our agents in the field, backed up by graphic leaflets, could do the trick.
Set it up, Jim. Half of this war is for the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese.
The only way to combat such a diffused network is with a whole lot of men beating the bushes out in the countryside. If we're going to win this thing, it's going to have to go on the ground and in a big way. Our current role as advisors is next to useless.
Tom, I know how you feel. Your boys are over there with their hands tied behind their backs. But the war for democracy in Vietnam is not the only war we're fighting. Understand?
Yes, sir.
Now, how close are we to winning this thing?
If things turn around a bit, we could be victorious in 6 to 12 months. The key is control of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, an ancient north-south supply route used by traders for centuries. The trail is really nothing more than a network of primitive paths through some of the densest jungle in the world.
I hope you're right, Paul. The last thing we want is to have our boys crawling around in the jungle. Thanks for the briefing, gentlemen. Keep me posted on new developments.
Hello, sir. Where to today?
The FBI building.
Certainly, sir.
Hello, Mr. President. What brings you this way?
Hello, Catherine. You're looking lovely today. Just, stopping by to speak with the director.
Of course, sir. Go right in.
Thanks, Catherine. You're a doll.
Mr. President, what a surprise. What can I do for you?
Just thought I'd come by to see how everything is going here.
Everything's running smoothly.
Great. Great. Anyway, I was, just wondering if you could give me a, update on the, crime situations in the cities.
Certainly, sir. Just give me a minute to speak with Steve down the hall. He's been studying this issue, and I believe he has an updated report in his office. It will just take me a minute. I'll be right back. I'm sorry that took me so long, sir, but I've got that report for you now.
I've just remembered that I have a photo session with Jackie and the kids. I'm sorry, but I have to leave. Thanks for your time.
Anytime, Mr. President. Goodbye.
Where would you like to go, Mr. President?
The White House.
At your service, sir.
Air disaster strikes in stormy North America for the second time this week. Following a Canadian crash earlier in the week, this plane bound for Philadelphia from Puerto Rico went down during a storm near Elkton, Maryland. All 81 persons aboard were killed in the crash that some experts attribute to a bolt of lightning. A contingent of servicemen arrives home from Vietnam as part of the Department of Defense's troop rotation policy. This is neither a reduction nor an increase of forces, just a rotation. So welcome home to those returning, and best wishes to all those soldiers heading overseas. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
I just stopped by to invite you and Jackie out to lunch next week. I couldn't help but notice that confidential envelope on your desk. Is there anything in there I should know about?
It's got some information about the assassination attempt.
Can I look at it?
Sure. I'll have a copy made for you on your way out.
Okay. I'll go back to my office and look into it.
That would be great. Thanks.
No trouble. I'll call you later about lunch.
Mr. President, Congressman Ornelas has just announced that he is going to hold hearings on the civil rights legislation beginning in 2 weeks. The Attorney General called and said to tell you that whatever you said to the old man must have worked. Congratulations, sir.
That's great news. Thank you for the update, Sean. All right, let's get started on Vietnam.
Mr. President, there are indications that the Communists have stepped up the flow of insurgents down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Intelligence also shows increased construction activity on the trail, indicating a move to improve transportation capabilities. I would advise preemptory airstrikes at targets along the trail.
Paul, didn't you tell me that the trail was just a network of old footpaths?
Yes, I did, sir.
Then what's going on? I want answers I can count on.
I'm sorry, sir, but we've just processed new recon photos that indicate far more activity on the trail than even a week ago.
I see. Please go on.
Well, sir, the photos show concentrated construction at 7 points along the trail. Bunkers that could be anti-aircraft emplacements and what appear to be bridge pylons just west of Dak To and Kham Duc.
Paul, aren't the South Vietnamese capable of making the airstrikes?
Unfortunately, no. We feel that the terrain and jungle cover would require a more surgical strike than anything the Vietnamese are currently capable of.
Could the South Vietnamese be trained to handle the mission, Paul?
Certainly they could, sir. However, time is short, and the political situation has distracted the high-level officers in Saigon.
And if we wait?
Every day we hesitate means more munitions and personnel reaching South Vietnam. If the Communists get a jump on hiding construction on the trail, it would be more difficult to ferret them out later.
So what we're talking here is involvement of U.S. combat troops in Vietnam?
Yes, sir. In a limited capacity.
Are there any other comments?
I believe a change in our role in Vietnam from advisory to combat would be premature at this point, sir. The move would be interpreted by the Communists as a provocation. They will argue that the action validates their presence there.
And it would be tough to sell to the people, Mr. President. We've been telling them all along we're there to train, not fight.
I say wait, Mr. President. Any combat action right now will hurt your chances for re-election.
The way I see it, doing nothing while the Communists march on South Vietnam will kill your chances for re-election. What do you want to do?
I can't run the risk of being perceived as soft on communism. I want to send combat troops over there.
That will require congressional approval, sir.
Yes, and in the meantime, I want to hear more about our military options.
I'll get General Ballard on it right away.
Good. I'm sure he'll be delighted. Thanks for your time, gentlemen.
You may believe you're seeing a flying saucer that's landed on water when you see it for the first time, but that's how futuristic the new British lifeboat looks. This craft was designed for rescues at sea when a disabled vessel is surrounded by fire. It is covered with steel and plastic with an asbestos lining, and although it emerges blackened, it comes through the fire test with great success. Now for the sports news. Midshipmen boast about the Navy being famous for its big guns, a statement that certainly rings out loud and clear about their big gunning quarterback, Roger Staubach. This year's Heisman Trophy was awarded to Staubach as the nation's outstanding college player. Roger is cool and collected under pressure with a sixth sense to do the right thing on the field at the right time. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, Mr. President. I've got a few things I'd like to discuss with you about your re-election campaign. I've assembled some figures for you to use to make some financial decisions. They are in that folder on your desk. Hello, Mr. President. I've got a few things I'd like to discuss with you about your re-election campaign. I've assembled some figures for you to use to make some financial decisions. They are in that folder on your desk.
All right, Ross. Where should we start?
You've got $1 million in your war chest. Campaign contributions are a little low right now, but that's only because you haven't done much campaigning yet. As the season wears on, your contributions will increase, especially if you participate in fundraising events.
Okay. What do I need to decide right now?
First, you need to determine how much money you want to allocate to advertising. Considering how far away the election is, you probably don't want to allocate very much right now. The second issue is whether you'd like to do some preliminary polling on the other candidates. If you want polling information, you'll need to allocate some funds for that as well. And finally, you need to okay the amount allocated for security. If that figure is unacceptable to you, feel free to adjust it.
I've made my decisions, Ross. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm looking forward to a very successful campaign, and on my way out I'll schedule a meeting through your secretary to discuss campaign touring with you.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Eric?
I just heard that Senator Buckman is speaking out against your decision to commit combat troops to Vietnam. Basically, he's using that decision against you in his campaign for president.
How are people reacting to him?
To be honest, sir, they're supporting him. I'm afraid this could be a decisive issue in your campaign for re-election.
Thank you for that update, Eric.
And now for our final story. Berliners remember times before the wall was built, times when families were free to visit each other regularly. This Christmas, the Wall of Shame will be open to the free people of the city for the first time since it was built. Tens of thousands of West Berliners are already lining up daily for passes to visit relatives and friends imprisoned behind the wall since the summer of 1961. It is estimated that almost 500,000 people have applied to cross into communist East Berlin during the 16-day period that the wall remains open. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. President, there's a crisis in Panama. You're wanted in the Situation Room right away.
Thanks, Sean. I'm on my way.
Mr. President, there's an urgent matter that requires your attention. We have a crisis situation on our hands in Panama. There's been rioting near the Canal Zone, and it took the efforts of American soldiers to restore order. Apparently, the whole thing was set off when some American students living in the Canal Zone raised our flag at their high school. This was in direct opposition to your agreement with President Herdia of Panama that the Stars and Stripes not be flown without the Panamanian flag right next to it.
As you know, sir, the right of Panama to fly her flag in the zone has been a sensitive subject for some time now. So when those students flew the American flag without Panama's flag, Panamanian students protested. They entered the Canal Zone carrying their country's flag and raised it next to our flag. After the Canal Zone police directed the students back to Panama City, a rumor started that their flag was trampled, causing a riot to break out. Angry Panamanians invaded the Canal Zone. The latest reports indicate that 6 people have died and that over 70 people have been injured. Now, Panama has severed relations with the United States.
I can't believe this. I entered into that agreement with Herdia just last year, and there's already trouble. Then again, what should I expect? We've had trouble over the Canal Zone for the past 30 years.
That's exactly right, Mr. President. The Panamanians resent us because of our sovereignty over the Canal Zone, and because they don't think we pay them enough annually for using the canal. This flag issue is just one more on their list of complaints about the United States.
What do you suggest that I do about this riot, gentlemen?
The way I see it, Mr. President, you have 2 choices. Either you apologize to the Panamanians for the problem and hope that smooths the whole thing over and they forget about it, or you agree to negotiate a new treaty with Herdia that would be more favorable to Panama.
Now hold on there, Paul. The treaty between Panama and the U.S. has already been renegotiated twice since its original signing in 1903. The hell, we just renegotiated the thing 8 years ago. What's the point of signing a contract if you don't stick to it? I say forget 'em. If they want to cut off diplomatic relations, then we should do the same. Let's get our senior officer at the U.S. Embassy out of Panama.
Jim, you know as well as I do that the canal is crucial to us. We use it as a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. We needed that canal during World War II and the Korean War, and it was indispensable during the Cuban Missile Crisis. There are even supplies going through the canal right now to help the effort in Vietnam. We can't just pull out of Panama.
Besides, the communists are just waiting for a chance to get in there and take over the canal. Then where would we be? Mr. President, I think you should agree to discuss a new treaty with Panama. Don't make any promises that there will be a new treaty, just agree to discuss the possibility. That should stem the rioting and hopefully set us on a smooth course again. What do you think?
I think you've got an excellent point, Tom. I don't want to guarantee a new treaty, but I'd be willing to discuss the idea if it would end the rioting.
I'll have that message relayed to President Herdia through the proper channels.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all, gentlemen. I appreciate your rapid assessment of the situation. I hope we can resolve this whole thing quickly.
We'll keep you updated, Mr. President.
Good. That will be all.
On the international news front, West Berliners are lining up by the tens of thousands for their sad retreat across the border. After seeing relatives for the first time since the Wall of Shame was erected in the summer of 1961, the Berlin Wall is being resealed as the 16-day pass agreement comes to an end. On the lighter side of things, the secret? Hard work, plain diet, and plenty of laughter, they say. That's what the French people who live high in the alpine village of Chambéry attribute their long lives to. 38 of 380 residents have a combined age of 3,200 years, an average of more than 84 years. People here don't even think about retiring until they're 90. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, we're experiencing some difficulties with Panama over your decision to discuss a new treaty. It seems that they want assurances from us that a new treaty will be negotiated before they'll come to the bargaining table.
Jim's right, sir. President Herdia has issued a statement requiring a full commitment from the U.S. before he will even discuss this with you. I think he's serious, too. This could drag on forever if we stick with the position of just discussing a new treaty. I think you should give Herdia the commitment he's looking for.
I have to disagree with Paul on this one, Mr. President. Herdia is just trying to see how far he can push us. I don't think we should give in to his demands. I think you should hold out until Herdia comes around. What would you like to do, sir?
I'm not going to be pushed around by Herdia. I promised to discuss the possibility of a new treaty, and that is exactly what I will do. I won't promise any more than that.
I'll see to it that President Herdia is informed of your decision, Mr. President.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you all for your time.
I researched the information in that confidential folder from Strachan. Here's what I found out. How's everything else on the investigation going?
Fine. I think I'm making some progress.
Great. I'm as interested in finding out who did this as you are. I've got a meeting in half an hour. I've got to go.
Reflections on the 1963 sports year as it winds down show it as another great one to be remembered. Baseball enjoyed a gala season, from opening day when right-hander John F. Kennedy threw out the first pitch, right down to the Dodgers' 4-game World Series sweep. Sandy Koufax's strikeout power reduced the mighty Yankees to toothpicks, with his pitching power winning the first and last games of the series for the Dodgers. For the first time ever in the track and field world, John Pennell cleared the 17-foot pole vault barrier. In golf, Jack Nicklaus won the Masters crown to fulfill his promise after winning the Open crown. The Toronto Maple Leafs defeated the Detroit Red Wings to take hockey's Stanley Cup for the second year in a row. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
I've managed to arrange your schedule so that you can go to Dallas. You'll be able to do some real investigating there. Do you want to go?
Absolutely. Great job, Bobby.
Thanks. Well, I've got to get back to work. I'll speak with you later.
Hello, Mr. President. Hello, Mr. President. First, I'd like to say congratulations again on getting Ornelas to schedule hearings on the civil rights legislation. Second, I'd like to say, now that we've finally got some hearings, what are we going to do about them? I think you should exert some pressure on the members of the committee to make sure that the hearings lead to a vote on the floor.
Hold on there, Walter. I'm not so sure that the President needs to do anything. I think that once Congressman Ornelas agreed to hold hearings on the bill, he committed himself to making sure that there would be a House vote. Do you agree with me, Mr. President?
I'm afraid I don't agree with you, Paul. Even though Congressman Ornelas scheduled hearings, he might still try to kill this bill in his committee. It might be necessary to take some action on this. Are there any suggestions?
Why don't you speak with Ornelas himself? I think he'd appreciate the recognition of his power over the situation.
I think you should speak with Congressman Jordan. He's got so many friends on the Hill, I'm sure he's got a good relationship with somebody on that committee.
There's always Mark Deering. He's young, but he's well respected. I think he could convince a few members of that committee to make sure that bill gets to the floor. What do you think, Mr. President?
I think I'll speak with Congressman Jordan.
I'll set that up for you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you all for your time, gentlemen. That will be all.
News of disaster strikes again. The vacation you'll never forget. That's how the 11-day cruise from Britain to warmer climes was advertised, and that's definitely how it will be remembered, at least by the 894 survivors of the Laconia disaster. More than 100 others are dead or missing after a small fire that started in the barbershop quickly spread throughout the ship. Engulfed in flames from stem to stern, the Greek liner was ripped apart by a series of explosions set off by the heat of the fire. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, Mr. President. How are you today?
I'm fine, Ross. How have you been?
Never better, sir. Never better. How's the First Lady?
She's, just fine. And how's your wife?
She's great. She's looking forward to meeting you, Mr. President.
I look forward to meeting her, too. Now, what's on the agenda today?
I've been arranging your travel itinerary for the campaign. I know that you need time to fully recuperate, so I haven't planned anything until February. And from there, I scheduled through the middle of April.
What have you come up with?
The itinerary is in the folder on your desk. I've tended to concentrate on states with the most electoral votes. Like you said in the last election, you want to be where the votes are. That's especially true right before a primary. So I've tried to schedule stops in states with critical primaries as well.
What do I need to do?
Well, you need to decide what will happen in each state. You can either give a speech or hold a fundraiser. If you choose to give a speech, just pick out a topic you want to discuss in that state.
I've made my decisions. Thank you for your time, Ross.
Anytime, Mr. President. I'll see you later.
Mr. President, Congressman Jordan is on his way in.
Good to see you today, Mr. President. I hear that you'd like to discuss the civil rights legislation.
That's right, Dan. As you know, I feel that this legislation is very important for our country. The Negro citizen needs to feel that he is every bit as important in his community as the white citizen. Furthermore, the Negro citizen needs to be confident in this nation's ability to do what is right and just. I'd like you to put some pressure on the members of the House Rules Committee. Dan, I want that bill out of committee soon.
I'd be happy to do that for you, sir. By the way, I was wondering if you'd be willing to support a bill I've got in the House right now. It has to do with providing funds for highway improvement. What do you say?
I scratch your back, you scratch mine, huh? Okay, Dan, you've got my support on that legislation. Now just get that civil rights bill out of committee.
I'll certainly do my best, Mr. President. Goodbye.
Hello? Mr. Alvarado? This is Jack Kennedy.
Yeah,
Really, Mr. Alvarado, I'm Jack Kennedy. I know that you've spoken with the police about what you saw in Dealey Plaza, and I want to ask you a couple of questions myself. May I ask you a few questions?
Of course you can ask me questions. As many questions as you like. And I'm sorry about that Hoover crack. I'm just not used to being called by the president.
I'm sorry to have bothered you, Mr. Alvarado. I really have nothing to ask you after all. Goodbye.
A British investigation of last week's Laconia disaster that killed more than 100 persons is pending after survivors reported defective lifeboats and the lack of emergency training. The captain denied the charges, saying there was no panic and that most emergency equipment was in good order. It's not Peter Pan, but the free flight 90-meter ski jump event is a spectacular favorite that draws the largest crowd of the 12-day Olympic meet. Over 70,000 gathered for this major event where top skiers jump the length of a football field with impeccable form that provides a thrilling climax to the 9th Winter Olympics. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. President, I'm sorry to have to bring this up again, but the problem with Panama just won't go away. President Herdia won't engage in discussions with the U.S. until we agree to negotiate a new treaty with Panama. He won't settle for an agreement to discuss the possibility. He wants a firm commitment. And I think that if he doesn't get one soon, he may just strike a deal with the communists. I'm afraid that we're in danger of losing Panama, Mr. President. Will you agree to negotiate a new treaty with Herdia?
All right, Paul. This stalemate has gone on long enough. Inform President Herdia that I'll negotiate a new treaty with him.
I'll get right on it, sir.
Good. I'll speak with you later, gentlemen.
Mr. President, the civil rights leaders are here to see you. I'm sending in Mr. Mel Newland and Mr. Jeffrey Irwin.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. We appreciate your taking the time to speak with us today.
Hello, Mr. Newland, Mr. Irwin. It's a pleasure to have you both at the White House today.
Thank you, sir. We are happy to be here. As you know, sir, we are here to discuss the passage of the Civil Rights Bill. We feel that it is very important that you stand behind this bill. Can we count on you to show the members of Congress the right road?
Mr. Newland, I will do everything I can to help this bill get through Congress.
I can't ask for more than that.
We value your support, Mr. President. We think this is going to be a tough fight.
You're right about that, Mr. Irwin.
Mr. President, I know that this is very short notice, but we are having a lunch meeting tomorrow at noon, and we were wondering if you might be able to attend. We would be quite honored to have you address the assembly.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Newland. I'm afraid that I've got a meeting at noon tomorrow. Maybe I could make it next time. Sorry.
That's all right, Mr. President. I completely understand. Well, I do appreciate your meeting with us today. Goodbye.
Thank you for your time, sir. Goodbye.
For our final story, There's nothing amusing about this underwater Cincinnati amusement park, and ironically, the nearby River Downs racetrack has been washed away. Over 100,000 Midwesterners are being affected by the flooding Ohio River and its tributaries that are cresting over 60 feet. Appeals for federal aid are being made by the governors of those states most affected by the awesome forces of this natural disaster. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Excuse me, Mr. President, but I'd like to discuss something that I'm afraid could become an issue during the campaign.
What is it, Carolyn?
We're receiving a lot of calls about that bill you supported for Congressman Jordan. I don't know if you saw the headlines, but the press described it as a controversial highway bill. Do you want to do some damage control? Maybe issue a statement?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. I can't afford to have this kind of negative publicity in an election year. What do you suggest?
Why don't we play up the fact that the bill will create a significant number of new jobs for American workers? We can just leave out the part about its huge cost to the American public. Does that sound all right to you?
That sounds fine, Carolyn. Thanks for taking care of this for me.
Of course, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I just heard about another Negro demonstration. This one's in Chicago.
Tell me about it, Bobby.
Well, they're calling it a hunger march. They're protesting against high unemployment among the Negro community and insufficient welfare.
How big is this demonstration?
I haven't got definite figures yet, but I think about 200 people are involved. There may be more. Do you want to give the press a comment?
Yes. Tell the press that I'm aware of the situation in Chicago and that I'm working on the civil rights legislation in an effort to improve the Negro's position in our society. How does that sound to you?
Sounds fine. You might want to play up the fact that the bill is out of committee and will be voted on by the House pretty soon. What do you think?
No, don't bother. Just leave it plain and simple.
Okay. I'll get the ball rolling on this one. Goodbye.
Mr. President, Senator Edwards is here to see you.
Hello, Mr. President. Thanks for seeing me on such short notice.
Of course, Josephine. What can I do for you?
I just wanted to inform you of what we on Capitol Hill think of your recent decision on Vietnam policy.
Oh? Well, you know I like to keep in touch with the mood on the Hill. Fire away.
Mr. President, most of us are completely against sending combat troops to Vietnam. It's not our war, sir.
We've tried to train the South Vietnamese army, but defense tells me it's a wasted effort. To win this thing, we are going to have to get involved directly.
How long do you think our involvement would last?
We should be out of there by the end of 1965.
And at what cost?
At whatever cost is necessary to stop the spread of communism.
Well, I can see your mind is made up. I just wanted to give you a heads up. It could be a tough battle getting this through Congress.
I appreciate the information. I'm doing what I think is right. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to move on.
All right, Mr. President. Thanks for your time. Goodbye.
And now for our final story. The first signs of spring were not very welcome in Southern California, where March winds brought raging fires instead of April showers. Santa Ana winds blowing in from the desert at 70 to 100 miles per hour snapped power lines and sparked powder dry brush. Flames spread throughout Glendale and Burbank, 12 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. Many owners were able to save their homes by wetting down the roofs of their houses. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Attention Air Force One passengers, we'll be landing at Dallas Love Field in approximately 10 minutes. The weather in Dallas is sunny and 68 degrees. We'll see you back on board tomorrow morning at 0800 hours.
Where to?
The Juggernaut Saloon. Do you know where that is?
Yeah. What can you tell me about Bill Strachan? What the hell are you talking about, buddy? You know anything about a guy named Strachan? No. What about a guy by the name of Frank Finn? Finn? Sounds familiar. Yeah, I think Phil, the bartender over there, might know him. Why don't you ask him? Thanks for the information.
What'll you have?
Actually, I'm interested in finding a guy by the name of Frank Finn. You know him?
Yeah, I know him. But I haven't seen him for a while. It's kind of funny, you know. He used to come in here just about every day. Then one day I was in the middle of a conversation with him about how this PI comes in asking about some camel, and he up and walks out. Right in the middle of the conversation. Hadn't even finished his beer.
That PI, was his name, Strachan?
I think so. I'm not really sure. Hey, is Finn in some kind of trouble?
I don't know. Is there anything else you can tell me about him?
Well, I'm not sure I should tell you this. But I do remember Finn talking with the guy a couple of months ago. I overheard them talking about killing the president. Of course, I thought they were kidding. Who wouldn't? You hear stuff like that all the time in Dallas. I never thought anyone would actually try to shoot the President of the United States.
Who was the guy that Finn was talking to?
He went by the name the Tin Man. Camels, Tin Men, this world's getting weird.
The Tin Man? You didn't get his real name? What did he look like?
No, he just said the Tin Man. I don't really remember what he looked like. Just a regular guy, I guess.
Thanks for the info.
What do you want?
Have you ever heard of a guy named Frank Finn?
Finn? No, never. Now leave me alone.
Do you know a guy by the name of, Bill Strachan?
What's with all the questions, buddy? Can't you see I'm busy here?
Do you know Strachan or not?
No, I've never heard of him. Okay?
Thanks for the information.
Leave me alone.
Have you ever heard of Frank Finn?
Look, buddy, I told you to leave me alone.
I'll leave you alone after you tell me if you know anything about Finn.
I'm not telling you again.
What's the problem here? It's a simple question.
That's it.
Where to? The, Dallas Police Headquarters.
Can I help you?
I need some information about the Strachan murder.
Who are you?
I'm Jack Kennedy.
Oh my God, it is you. The man you need to speak with is named Greg Kruger. Go right up those stairs, Mr. President.
Can I help you?
I'm looking for Greg Kruger.
He's right over there.
May I help you?
Yes. Have you figured out who killed Bill Strachan yet?
Who are you?
I'm Jack Kennedy.
I can't believe it's you. I'm sorry if I was rude. Gee, the president. Oh, yeah. The Strachan case. I'm sorry, sir, we haven't solved that one yet. He was shot walking out of his office building. We think it was a professional job. High-powered rifle, one shot. The rifleman was an expert.
Do you have any idea who would want him dead?
Well, the guy was a private investigator. I figure he dug up something on somebody that they didn't appreciate. We've gone through his files, but we haven't found anything.
Thanks for the information. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. President.
Where to?
4275 10th Avenue.
May I help you?
Yes, I'm, looking for Bill Strachan's office.
Well, his office was down the hall, but I'm afraid he's been killed, and the office has been closed.
Is there any way I can get in touch with someone from the office?
I'm sorry, I don't know anything about it.
Thanks anyway.
Where to?
Back to my hotel, please.
Congratulations, Mr. President. The civil rights legislation made it out of committee. The country is really excited about the House vote that's coming up.
Speaking of that vote, Mr. President, I've given it a great deal of thought, and of the 217 votes you need to win in the House, I think you've got about 200 right now, and there are a number of undecided members. As a result, I believe it's necessary for you to use your power to win over some of those congressmen who might vote against the bill. I've got a short list of men who I believe are of paramount importance on this issue. Would you like me to go over that list with you?
Yes, Walter. I'd like to hear your suggestions.
The first man on my list is Representative Ronald Wyatt of Connecticut. Right now he's a fence sitter. I think that a call from you, sir, could bring him over to our side, and he might bring some other undecided voters with him. Second, I think Gilbert Ornelas is someone you should consider speaking with. I know we've discussed him a great deal in the past, but he's so damn powerful he can't be ignored. Although he probably won't come out in favor of the bill himself, I think he would be willing to privately influence others to vote for it. Now, the third man on my list is Leonard Ryan of Virginia.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Walt, but isn't Ryan resolutely anti-civil rights?
He has been fairly unbending in his position against civil rights in the past, Paul, but I believe he could be persuaded to see the value of this bill, or at least convinced that its passage is inevitable, so he might as well join the winning team. Besides, imagine the amount of votes he could bring with him. All those Southern gentlemen on the Hill stick together. If we get him on our side, we're assured victory. So that's it, Mr. President. Ronald Wyatt, Gilbert Ornelas, or Leonard Ryan. Who would you like to speak with?
I think Congressman Ornelas is the man to speak with.
I'll set up a time for you to speak with him, sir.
Now that we've got that all worked out, I'd say that we're through. Thank you, gentlemen.
There's only one Democrat willing to run against you, Mr. President. It's Andrew Sharp, the senator from Georgia. He's pretty conservative for a Democrat, and as you can imagine, he's against the Civil Rights Bill.
That's putting it mildly, Sam. Sharp's a staunch segregationist, sir. He does support entitlement programs for the needy, though. His biggest support comes from the southern states.
What are Sharp's views on Vietnam?
He claims that he would be more aggressive in dealing with the communist forces in Vietnam. I think he'd escalate our efforts over there.
I don't think he's much to worry about. Now, on the Republican side, there are 3 men and 1 woman that I believe will announce their candidacies very soon. They are James Decker, Glenn Hansen, Oliver Buckman, and Mary Misson.
I think your biggest threat will be from Glenn Hansen. He's the governor of Pennsylvania and a progressive Republican. Hansen thinks the government should be less involved in private business. He endorses the Civil Rights Bill, and as for Vietnam, he supports our position as advisors over there.
Personally, I think James Decker, the Colorado senator, could be a problem. The guy's got a strong following among the very conservative members of his party.
What are Decker's views on the basic issues?
He wants the government to stop interfering with private business, and he's against the Civil Rights Bill because he feels the state should deal with the issue themselves. As for Vietnam, I believe he'd go to combat.
Tell me about the other candidates.
Oliver Buckman, the senator from Illinois, is very similar to Glenn Hansen. Like Hansen, Buckman doesn't like the government to be involved in private business any more than it has to. He supports the Civil Rights Bill, and he supports the U.S.'s current position in Vietnam.
Buckman's problem is that he doesn't have the popular support that Hansen has. I don't think Buckman's going to be in this race for long.
I agree with Fred. Buckman doesn't have the political clout to win the Republican nomination. He'll probably drop out early.
The 4th Republican contender is Senator Mary Misson from Rhode Island. She's a self-proclaimed moderate Republican who supports the Civil Rights Bill and is willing to vote for legislation that affects private enterprise. She's got a lot of support in New England and the northern industrial states.
There's one candidate you won't have to worry about. This country is definitely not ready to accept a woman as president. So that's it for the candidates, Mr. President. Decker, Hansen, Buckman, and Misson for the Republicans, and you and Sharp for the Democrats.
Another thing we need to discuss, Mr. President, is your campaign slogan. I've met with the advertising agency and they've come up with 4 choices. I need you to decide which one you want. The first one is, all the way with JFK. Second, 4 more in 64. Third, Kennedy. Again. And finally, let's keep the country moving.
I like that last one, because it plays off your slogan from the last election. Let's get the country moving again. That was very effective.
That's a good point, Sam. Any other opinions?
4 more in 64 sounds too impersonal. I prefer Kennedy again.
I agree. I think Kennedy again is excellent. It's simple and straightforward. Which one do you like, sir?
I like all the way with JFK. That's the one we should go with.
I couldn't agree more, sir. I'll let the advertising agency know of your decision.
Thank you, Fred. Now that that's settled, I'd say that this meeting is adjourned.
And now for celebrities in the news. As Beatle popularity continues to grow worldwide, they are honored everywhere they go. With one more British Showbiz Award, here they are honored at the Dorchester Hotel, where many other crowned princes have dined before them. Now for the sports news. The undefeated UCLA Bruins came roaring into Kansas City to take on the Duke Blue Devils for the National Collegiate title. And roar they did, as Gail Goodrich chalked up 27 points by himself, giving the Bruins 30 straight victories to rank them among the great teams of all time. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
President, a situation has developed off the coast of Florida that I think you should know about. 4 Cuban fishing boats have been found in our territorial waters, and we have reason to believe they may have been sent by Cuba's Premier Lopez. I view this as an act of aggression by Cuba. I think we should respond.
I agree with Tom. We've been here before with the missile crisis, and we found that it pays off to stand up to Lopez. I say we arrest the sailors on those 4 boats and see how Cuba reacts.
I understand your position. Are there any other comments about this situation?
Let's not make this into a big deal. Those boats may have just drifted off course. It was probably an accident.
I've got to agree with Paul on this one. I think we should just send them home. I've got too many other issues to deal with right now to let some fishing boats bother me.
I'll alert the Coast Guard of your decision, sir. They should have those boats on their way within a few hours.
Good. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Mr. President, Congressman Ornelas is on line 1.
Gilbert, Jack Kennedy, how are you today?
I'm very well, Mr. President.
I'm glad to hear that, Gilbert.
President Kennedy, is there something on your mind?
I know that as a representative of the great state of Mississippi, you would be unable to cast a vote in favor of the Civil Rights Bill. However, as an influential congressman, you would be able to encourage others to vote for the bill.
I see. Well, I think that might be possible, Mr. President, but I would be unable to guarantee my support at this time. I can only agree to think about your suggestion. Is that acceptable to you?
Gilbert, I really need your assurances now. I have to know that you're with me on this one.
I'm afraid I can't do that. I need to give this some further thought.
Damn it, Gilbert, I haven't got time. Are you with me or not?
No need to get so upset, Mr. President. I'm sure we could work something out like gentlemen. Now, I'll give you my word that I will do my best to satisfy your request, and we'll leave it at that, all right?
Fine. I'll speak with you later, Gilbert. Goodbye.
On the international news front, the United States Ambassador to Japan, Edwin O. Reischauer, was stabbed by a young Japanese man who scaled the embassy compound wall in Tokyo. The ambassador was rushed to the hospital with a deep thigh wound and loss of blood and is now out of danger. The 19-year-old assailant with a long record of mental illness was quickly subdued. Japan offered their apologies quickly, but the ambassador expressed the hope that the incident would be forgotten. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Mr. Mr. President, the situation with Cuba has escalated. Cuban Premier Lopez has cut off the water supply to our naval station at Guantanamo.
What did he do that for? Didn't those fishermen get sent back to Cuba without incident?
They certainly did, Mr. President, but the Cubans have hated our presence on that island for 60 years, ever since we signed the treaty to lease naval bases from them. We've got a perpetual lease on the land in their country, and they don't like it. Lopez wants us out of Cuba, and he's going to do anything to make that happen. I say to hell with them. We can get our own water.
What have you got in mind, Jim?
They've already implemented Rationing Plan Alpha on the base at Guantanamo. Alpha limits the use of water for personal reasons to 3 hours a day. Right there, that saves us 1.5 million gallons of water per day. We've got enough water on the base to last 12 days.
Besides, we can ship water in from places like Florida, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. We really should have a supply of water that's independent of Cuba anyway. You know we can't depend on Lopez.
That's the situation, Mr. President. We can't leave naval personnel and their families on the base without water. Either we give in to Lopez's threats and evacuate Guantanamo, or we work out our own water supply system and stay on the naval base. What would you like to do?
I won't give up the base on Guantanamo. So it looks like the only thing to do is create our own water supply.
I couldn't agree more, sir. Now, there's also the issue of the 2,500 Cubans who work on the base. As I'm sure you're aware, Cuba requires these workers to exchange the American dollars we pay them for pesos every night.
The point is, sir, Cuba is benefiting from our presence there, and at the same time they're hostile to us. What I think Paul is driving at is that we should require those workers to spend their money on the naval base and not in Cuba. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree with you. Why should we allow Cuba to gain from us and at the same time complain about us?
I'll have the Cuban workers either agree to that requirement or they'll be dismissed.
Excellent. I'll speak with you all later. Thank you.
Mr. President? Mr. President, there's a situation developing that you might be interested in. Negro parents and students in Boston, Chicago, and Cincinnati are planning a one-day boycott of city schools. They're protesting de facto segregation in those schools.
De facto segregation? Haven't we got enough to deal with trying to end state-mandated segregation in the South? Now Negroes have got to complain about unintentional segregation in northern cities?
Arthur, you know as well as I do that you don't need laws to create racial separation. Social and economic conditions can do that for you. Just think about it. The fact that Negroes can only afford to live in certain parts of the city creates racial imbalance in the schools. That's what de facto segregation is all about. Even without forced segregation, whites and Negroes are isolated from each other.
I'd like to hear more about this boycott.
Well, sir, some people are estimating as many as 200,000 students in Chicago alone may be absent from school for a day. With Boston and Cincinnati added to that, this thing could be huge. I think you should acknowledge this activity by phoning some of the boycott leaders. It's like that supportive phone call you made to Coretta King when Martin Luther King was in jail. That went over like gangbusters in the Negro community.
That's an interesting idea. Fred, Arthur, what do you think?
I think that either you or Bobby should make an appearance in Chicago. Give a speech. Something high profile that we can use to boost your popularity in the northern states. Besides, it would probably help you in the South as well. I'm sure they would be happy to have the spotlight off their racial problems for a while.
I don't think you should get involved at all, Mr. President. This whole thing could become violent, and to be associated with an activity that ended in serious injury to a number of school children seems unwise at best.
I think I'll go the phone call route. I don't want to look too enthusiastic about this protest, but with a few calls, I can demonstrate my compassion for the situation.
All right, Mr. President. I'll have those calls set up for you. That's all we have to discuss for now.
Good. I'll speak with you later, gentlemen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here's tonight's top story. The U.S. Maddox and the Sea Turner Joy continue patrolling international waters off the shores of North Vietnam. Special forces are monitoring communist aggression as the president considers various options on what to do in the Vietnam situation. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well. What's on the agenda today?
The civil rights legislation, Mr. President. Having won in the House of Representatives, the bill is now in the Senate. And, as you know, the first hurdle there is for the Senate to agree to make the bill its pending business, which calls it up for formal debate. That pending business vote is coming up soon, and it looks like it's going to be a close one.
He's right about that, Mr. President. There's a block of 19 Southern senators who are fiercely opposed to this bill, and they've been stalling the pending business vote. In addition to the Southern bloc, there are other segregationists in the Senate, and some senators just haven't made up their minds yet. This is going to be tough.
Do you have any recommendations for people that I should speak with?
Mr. President, you should speak with Victor Forbes. He's for this bill, and I believe he can persuade other senators to vote your way.
Josephine Edwards is also for this bill, and she's much more powerful than Forbes. She's the senator you should speak with, Mr. President.
Why don't you speak with Matthew Reynolds? He's undecided right now, but I think you could persuade him to vote your way. And he could bring some of the other undecided votes with him.
I'll speak with Senator Forbes. Can you set that up for me, Fred?
Of course, Mr. President.
Thank you, Fred. This meeting is adjourned, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Hello, sir. Where to today?
The FBI building.
Certainly, sir.
Hello, Mr. President. Back again.
Hello, Catherine.
I've got to keep my eye on you. You get prettier every day.
I'm afraid he's not in right now, Mr. President.
Then I'll just wait for him in his office.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I'm not supposed to let anyone into the director's office when he isn't in.
Catherine, I'm sure you could let the President of the United States into his office. You can trust me.
I guess you're right. Go ahead.
Where would you like to go, Mr. President?
The Lincoln Memorial.
At your service, sir. Where would you like to go, Mr. President?
The Jefferson Memorial.
Certainly, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here's tonight's top story. The maiden flight of the B-70, the plane that was designed to replace the Strategic Air Command's B-52, satisfied officials that it will shape the future course of commercial transport. The new jet was discarded as a military weapon as intercontinental missiles made the bomber's value questionable. $1.5 million has already been spent testing this queen of the air with hopes that the prototype will now be used to develop a supersonic jet passenger plane. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
President. I just wanted to keep you updated on the Guantanamo situation. Lopez has been trying to gain international support for Cuba. He wants to cancel the treaty that leases us the naval base. Lopez claims that we are using Guantanamo for spies and for provoking incidents with Cuba.
Like I've said all along, they want us off their land. Mr. President, I don't think you should give in to him. We have a valid treaty with Cuba, and Lopez will have to live with it.
The only problem is that the treaty's looking a little one-sided. The agreement only requires the U.S. to make a token rental payment of $2,000 in gold a year, and the Cuban government hasn't even accepted that since 1959. They want it known that they don't accept the lease agreement.
Now that we've made the Cuban workers at Guantanamo spend their earnings on the base, we've decreased Cuba's financial gain by another $5 million. Lopez could make a pretty strong argument internationally against this treaty. What do you want to do, Mr. President? Force Lopez to stick to the treaty or give up the base?
I don't care what Lopez says to the world. We have a valid treaty with Cuba, and I'm not going to give up Guantanamo.
I couldn't agree more, Mr. President. We'll see to it that your views are made public.
Good. That will be all, gentlemen.
Mr. President, I have Senator Forbes on line 1 for you.
Victor, it's Jack Kennedy.
Mr. President, what can I do for you today?
As you know, Victor, I'm very interested in seeing the Civil Rights Bill succeed in the Senate. I'm looking for just the right senators to help me make that happen, and I think you're one of those senators, Victor.
Well, I hope I am, sir. Exactly what would you like me to do for you?
I was hoping that as a senator with your experience and authority, you might be able to encourage others to vote the way you do. I'd like to see us win this pending business vote easily.
I agree completely. I'll get right on it, sir.
Thanks, Victor. I appreciate your support. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. President.
Where can I take you?
The Washington Monument.
No problem.
I've been waiting here forever.
Don't start with me. Where's the money?
Need a few more.
What the hell is going on with you?
Look, we're in a tight spot. I can't get the money to you right now.
Get in the car.
Today's perfect liftoff of the Gemini space capsule takes America one step closer to the moon. The 7,000-pound Gemini picks up where Mercury left off last year. Now the main objective is to lead the way for 2 astronauts to go into orbit in 1965 and perfect space rendezvous techniques that are essential for returning from the moon. On the lighter side of things, it's not just Americans that are fond of stunts. 2 Frenchmen have a mysterious balancing act where they take a standard automobile and mount a conventional ladder on it, and from there on, nothing is by the book. While one partner drives, the other climbs the ladder, and away they go. How is it done? Precise balance or hidden weights? At least this stunt has a new angle. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Sir, we've got congressmen on both sides of the aisle criticizing your decision to send combat troops to Vietnam.
I anticipated their anger, Sam. What's the scuttle?
It's the standard political response. They fear re-election backlash should they be seen as hawks.
Can't these guys forget, just for once, their own political skins and do what is right?
Victor Forbes is leading the charge in the House. They've been talking for most of the morning with no let-up in sight. Mary Misson's stirring up the senators.
What else? Walter?
We have the Civil Rights Bill coming up. We'll need support from both sides on that one. Pushing Vietnam now could carry some negative baggage then.
And you'll need congressional approval to send the troops.
You're right, Sam. Any ideas?
Mr. President, we could back off on combat troops at least until we can turn a few key congressmen.
That is an option, sir, and it wouldn't be hard to sell to the people.
Great. Now we're selling the president on his ability to flip-flop on his decisions. Sir, to back down now would be a grave political mistake here at home and would send the wrong message to the communists.
Sam, what are our chances of pushing Vietnam through Congress?
It's possible, but it'll take some doing.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll stay with combat troops in Vietnam.
What about the press, sir?
Prepare a statement, Fred. Tell them Jack Kennedy's standing tough on communist aggression in Southeast Asia. That will be all, gentlemen.
And now for celebrities in the news. I'm just wild about Harry as this week's national birthday wish to former President Harry Truman as he turns 80 years old. Now for the sports news. Taking on the San Francisco Warriors for the National Basketball Association title, the Boston Celtics rolled to a 105-99 victory for their 6th crown in a row. While Wilt Chamberlain scored 30 points for the Warriors, the combined team efforts of Casey Jones, John Havlicek, and Bill Russell registered the Celtic patent for winning basketball championships. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. President, I don't mean to alarm you, but I'm afraid we are on the verge of a national railroad shutdown. The Illinois Central Railroad went on strike this morning, and a national walkout is scheduled for midnight tonight.
Walter, aren't you being a little dramatic?
I don't think so, Paul. I've spoken with both sides on this one, and neither one will budge. The management and the unions have been in negotiations for over 4 years, without settling anything. Finally, the railroad said they were going to implement some of the changes without union consent, and the unions decided they had to strike.
When did the Illinois Central decide to strike? Why didn't I hear about this sooner?
They didn't want anyone to know because if the railroad knew of the pending strike, they would have gotten a temporary court order to stop it. This was a surprise strike.
Well, can't the railroad get a court order to make them go back to work?
They could, but they would just have to deal with more surprise strikes on other railroads. Both sides realized that something's got to happen now.
What are the main issues in the dispute?
Basically, the union demands include wage and work guarantees as well as overtime and holiday pay. The railroad management demands include a change in the wage structure and a lengthening of certain train runs.
Sounds like a typical union management dispute, if you ask me.
You're right, Paul. The only problem is that this union management dispute could affect about 7 million workers across the country and cut our gross national product drastically.
I'm afraid that would reflect poorly on you, sir. You know how the press likes to relate every problem in the country to the president, especially in an election year. I think we need to do something quickly.
Well, are there any suggestions?
Why don't we go to Congress for emergency legislation to prohibit a strike?
They did that last summer, Bobby, and I don't think Congress wants to do it again. Besides, that's only a short-term solution. I think we should allow the strike to happen. Strikes are a great way to get collective bargaining started again.
I think the best thing to do is persuade the unions to postpone their strike and the railroads to postpone their changes for a short time. Then, if this administration gets involved, I'm sure we could help both sides come to some form of permanent agreement. I'd be happy to try that approach, Mr. President, but I think that the request for a postponement would be more persuasive coming from you.
Why don't you ask Vice President Johnson to speak to them? If anyone can be persuasive, it's him.
I still say let them strike. Loss of revenue and loss of wages is the most powerful form of persuasion there is.
What do you think, Mr. President? Do you want to go to Congress for emergency legislation, have someone from this administration get involved, or just let the strike happen?
I think we need to get involved. Let's ask for a postponement.
Would you like to do that yourself, sir? Or do you want Walter or Vice President Johnson to do the persuading?
I think Johnson should handle this one. You know what a bulldog he can be when it comes to getting people to do what he wants. This'll be perfect for him. He'll probably start waving the flag and talking about Mom and apple pie. It would be a joy to watch.
Sounds like it'll work, Mr. President.
Thanks for suggesting it, Paul. And Walter, thank you for bringing this issue to my attention. That'll be all for now, gentlemen. I'll speak with you later.
News of disaster strikes again. Alaska has begun the task of rebuilding after the greatest earthquake ever recorded. The unofficial death count stands at about 100, and property damages are estimated at $500 million. Anchorage, with a population of 100,000, was the center of the severe shock that ripped down 4th Avenue, the main shopping street. Scientists estimate that the Alaska earthquake was 35 times stronger than the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, Mr. President.
Hello, Ross. What's new?
Not much. I'm keeping busy with the campaign, sir.
Yes, of course. What's today's meeting about?
It's time to schedule some more campaign speeches and fundraisers. We've already scheduled through mid-April, so we'll pick up there and plan through most of June.
That'll do it. Thanks for your time.
Goodbye, Mr. President.
Great news, Mr. President. The Senate has made the Civil Rights Bill its pending business. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome, sir. Well, I'll let you enjoy your victory in peace. Goodbye.
General Douglas MacArthur, one of the greatest military geniuses in U.S. history, died today. MacArthur's 52-year military career began at West Point and spanned both World Wars and Korea. As commander in the Far East, he made the famous "I shall return" vow to the people of the Philippines, and return he did, as U.S. military power moved in to conquer the Japanese. MacArthur was 84 years old. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, I've spoken with the Secret Service and they told me that they've heard some bad things about you campaigning in Texas. To be quite honest, they're afraid of another attempt on your life.
What are you suggesting, Ross? That I not campaign in Texas?
I'm not sure it's worth it, sir. What's the point of campaigning if you're going to get injured or worse, get killed? But it's up to you. What do you want to do?
I think you better cancel my engagements in Texas, Ross. I'm not taking any chances.
I think you've made the right decision, sir. I'll speak with you later.
Hello, everyone. What's the latest?
Well, Mr. President, the Southern bloc of senators is using delaying tactics on the civil rights legislation. They've started making long-winded speeches about everything under the sun. I'm not worried, though. This filibuster won't last. They're just trying to make a point. I think they'll talk themselves out.
I don't know about that, Bobby. Those senators seem pretty serious about using their right of unlimited debate to keep this legislation from ever getting voted on. Mr. President, you might want to nip this in the bud by speaking with some influential senators. How do you feel about this filibuster?
I'm rather concerned about it. Walter, who do you suggest I speak with?
I think you should speak with Josephine Edwards or Victor Forbes. They're both behind this bill 100%, and I think either one of them could help move this filibuster along.
Why don't you speak with Wade Jackson, the senator from Utah? I know that he's not in favor of this bill, but I heard that he's sure it's going to fail when Senate votes on it. Why not encourage him to speed the process by helping to end the filibuster? The two of you have opposite goals, but it seems to me they'd both be served by ending the debate. Who would you like to speak with, Mr. President?
I'll speak with Senator Edwards.
I'll set that up for you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Fred. That will be all, gentlemen.
This is what happened in sports today. Arnie's Army was out in force as he defeated last year's Masters winner Jack Nicklaus. Palmer donned the traditional Masters jacket given to him by the dethroned champ for the 4th time in his career, before a crowd of 30,000. Casey Stengel and his New York Mets have moved into their new Shea Stadium home. Following right behind, 50,000 fans flocked to see the season opener in this plush new park. Ironically, the last-place Mets draw a full house on their first day, while the perennial winning Yankees drew only 12,000 for their opener. That's all for sports tonight. Goodbye.
Hello, Mr. President. How are you today?
Terrific, Ross. How are you?
Just fine, sir. I'm here to discuss your campaign finances.
Great. What do I need to do?
Well, you need to determine whether you want to adjust your advertising budget. We're coming up on some important primaries, so you'll probably want to increase your spending. Likewise, if you want to adjust the amounts you've allocated to straw polls or security, you can do that too.
All right, Ross. I'm finished.
Goodbye, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Senator Edwards is here to see you.
Hello, Mr. President. It's nice to see you.
It's always a pleasure to see you, Josephine. How's George? I heard he had to have an operation on his knee.
Yes, he did. An old football injury. Anyway, he's doing just fine now. I'll tell him that you asked about him.
Tell him I know all about football injuries. I hope he's taking it easy.
A little too easy, I think. He's begun to enjoy being waited on a little too much. Well, enough about George. Is there something I can do for you, Mr. President?
Josephine, the reason that I asked you to come by today is that I'm concerned about this filibuster. Is there anything you can do to move this thing along?
I understand your concern, sir, and of course I want to help you in any way I can, but I think these senators will tire themselves out, don't you?
I'm afraid I don't, Josephine. These guys are capable of extreme tactics. I think that if they get this filibuster going too long, it will only gain momentum. I'd like you to intervene.
As you know, Mr. President, if even one senator feels like filibustering, he can do so effectively. So I'm not exactly sure what I can do, but I'll try my best.
That's all I can ask. Thanks, Josephine. Have a good day.
Goodbye, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Senator Lewis Quigley is here to see you.
Hello, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to see you again. How's your lovely wife?
She's as wonderful as ever, Lewis. Thank you for asking. How's your golf game these days?
Well, I can't complain, Mr. President, but I can't brag about it either.
I know exactly how you feel, Lewis.
Mr. President, if I may come to the reason that I am here today, I'd like to discuss the so-called civil rights movement. As you can imagine, those of us from Alabama are less than anxious to have this legislation passed.
I understand how you feel, Lewis. However, there are a great many people who feel that the time has come for this bill.
Well, the time may have come, but Southern traditions and values have not changed. I'm sure you are aware that this bill will affect a great many people, white and colored, in ways that they will not like, in ways that they are not comfortable with. A colored boy needs to understand his place in society the same way a white man needs to. People are happier when boundaries are clear. Don't you agree?
I'm afraid I don't, Lewis. I can't condone the judging of a man by the color of his skin. That is too great an injustice to continue, just for tradition's sake.
Well, you may scoff at traditions, my good man, but there are a great many American citizens who appreciate the value of traditions. And I'm afraid that will become quite clear when the Senate votes on your little bill. You'd better be sure of your convictions, Mr. President, because this fight will not be an easy one.
You know I always enjoy a good fight, Lewis. Thank you for coming by today. Goodbye.
Good day, Mr. President.
As you know, I've decided to go with combat troops in Vietnam. I want options on how to go about it.
Sir, the first plan seeks to destroy the communist supply lines into South Vietnam, concentrating on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the Mekong River. Codenamed Lulu, we implement in 3 phases. First, various sections of the trail we know are heavily traveled will be blanket bombed on a weekly basis at irregular intervals.
What are the latest figures on the buildup along the trail, Tom?
We estimate some 7,000 troops traverse the trail each month, sir. Although the trail cannot accommodate large vehicle traffic, we believe significant arms are being carried south on the backs of those men.
Our operatives report round-the-clock construction on bridges and roads that can only signal an intention to modernize the trail. We have reports from the highest levels indicating a fundamental restructuring of North Vietnamese budget to accommodate the buildup.
Go on, Tom.
We'll also fly daily sorties up and down the trail and the Mekong River with the F-16s, A-6s, and the Cobra and Huey helicopter gunboats. Anything that moves on the trail or floats on the river will be targeted. Third, the Navy will control the coastline, harassing any supply vessels that attempt coastal or open ocean operations.
Sounds like Lulu is equipment intensive, but keeps our boys out of the jungles for the most part.
That's right, sir. Highly equipment-based. It's an air war. We want to cut the arms flow off at the source. Your people should be concurrently working to block arms sales that could wind up in the hands of the NVA.
Good. And your other option?
Ground war, sir. Operation Rosemary. Many of my generals do not believe this war can be won without getting dirty. The enemy lives in the jungle. From there they wage a guerrilla war, slipping out at night to strike and then retreat. The plan involves a large-scale commitment of men and machinery. We go into the bush after them.
What are we talking about in timing and numbers, Tom?
We're looking at about 100,000 combat troops over a 6-month period to start, sir. The strategy for a ground war is essentially the same as in the air. Cut off the supply. We would seek to control key points along the trail and the river. The Navy mission to control the coast would remain unchanged.
Okay. Thank you, General.
Which plan do you want to go with, sir? The airstrike or the ground war?
We'll go with the air war for now. Let's pound the communists into retreat.
Yes, sir.
Good work, General. I'll see you all later.
The Beatles continue to perform to sell-out audiences, and to say that the fans get carried away is putting it mildly. Once the band starts to play, it's a question of who puts on the better performance, the quartet or the audience. It takes all kinds to make up a Beatle audience. The band is due back in the U.S. in a couple of months, but don't worry about tickets. They were sold out within hours after they went on sale. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Hello, Mr. President. We need to review the memorandum I placed in the file on your desk.
Okay, Eric. What's it about?
As per your decision to implement Operation Lulu, it sets the parameters for the bombing sorties. You can go with the numbers recommended in the memo or adjust them.
There it is, Eric. Put it through.
I'll do it, sir. Thanks for your time.
Mr. President, there's been an incident in Alabama that I'd like to discuss with you. It seems that George Wallace, the governor of that state, was giving a speech in Mobile when approximately 700 demonstrators gathered to protest his stance on the civil rights legislation, calling him a racist and a bigot, among other things. Anyway, the police arrived using tear gas and billy clubs, and they arrested 45 people. Now the whole town is under martial law.
Fred, I'd like to hear some more about this.
Wallace is famous for his staunch anti-civil rights rhetoric. Last year in his inaugural address as governor, he said, quote, "Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever." As you know, Mr. President, it was the day Wallace physically tried to keep those 2 Negro students from enrolling at the University of Alabama that you announced you would introduce the Civil Rights Bill to Congress. With a Senate vote on the Civil Rights Bill coming up, people are looking to you for some reaction to this latest occurrence.
What do you recommend?
You could release a statement to the press denouncing this violence.
Or I could go to Alabama and speak with some of the Negro leaders there. That usually helps the situation, and it won't take away from the Senate vote.
That sounds like the best alternative, Bobby. Why don't you do that?
Certainly, Mr. President. I'll make arrangements to leave tonight.
Thanks, Bobby. I'll speak with you gentlemen later.
Tompkins, FBI.
Tompkins, Jack Kennedy here.
What can I do for you today, sir?
Have you got any new information for me?
We're working on it, sir. I know that you're anxious to have this whole thing resolved, but we just don't have anything new. I'll let you know when we do.
Thanks for your time, Detective.
This is what happened in sports today. The 90th Run for the Roses set a fast pace at Churchill Downs. Northern Dancer, ridden by jockey Bill Hartick, made no mistakes in the 2-minute flat Kentucky Derby victory. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, I've got the latest public opinion numbers on the Vietnam issue.
Let's hear the good news, Carolyn.
Of the Americans following this issue, a slim majority support your plan to send combat troops to Vietnam. However, once American boys start dying over there, they may change their minds.
Yes, when it comes to war, the public is a bit fickle.
Very true. You may want to stay in the middle of the road on this one until the election.
Why bother? I'm tired of this job anyhow, Carolyn. Thanks for the report.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. President, 2 weeks ago, the Attorney General asked me to study the current state of the civil rights movement, and I've given him a full report on my findings. Would you like me to give you the highlights?
Yes, Jennifer. I'm interested in hearing what you've learned.
The most obvious issue is the civil rights legislation. As you can imagine, the Negro community is very excited about the Senate vote that's coming up. They're confident about that vote, too. The people I spoke with indicated that they were certain the bill would be made into law.
That's very interesting. Please continue.
Well, despite the fact that the Civil Rights Bill is succeeding in Congress, there are an increasing number of Negroes who have become disillusioned with the more moderate civil rights organizations and leaders. They are harboring a lot of anger about what they consider to be a lack of success by these organizations. I'm afraid we could see a marked increase in violence from them if the bill fails in the Senate.
Please, go on.
The situation in the southern states has become almost intolerable. The whites feel so threatened by the success of the legislation that they've generally made life miserable for the Negroes. The whites' attitude seems to be that you may get this bill made into law, but you're going to have a tough time enforcing it.
I appreciate the update, Jennifer. That'll be enough. Thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. I'll let you get back to what you were doing.
Now for the sports news. Nearly completed 9.5-acre Houston Stadium is so high that Major League sluggers can't hit the domed roof. The $24 million indoor stadium that eliminates baseball rainouts is also air-conditioned for the hot Houston summers. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Sir, we have intelligence on a coup in Saigon.
Well, it's not like it was expected. Did Min survive?
Yes, sir. Apparently the takeover was bloodless. We understand he may be appointed titular leader under Khan.
And what about Khan? Has he made any overtures to the communists?
Not that we know of, sir. In fact, in a radio broadcast this morning, Khan explained the purge as necessary because Min's junta failed to make progress against the communists.
Well, that's positive. So where are we now?
We've still got good support for our presence in Vietnam. And Chris Reams said this morning that he believed the political situation should stabilize with Khan.
Did Reams know about the coup beforehand?
We believe he did, although he didn't appear to support or oppose it. Also, we have reports that one of our advisors, a Colonel Richard Haskins, accompanied Khan to Saigon from Hue 2 days ago.
Anything else?
Apparently, Haskins told a few associates that Khan was in Saigon for a dentist's appointment.
General?
I'll check it out, sir.
I don't like this. We've got Reams over there acting innocent when we know he's anything but innocent. And now we've got advisors making cover for coup leaders. Keep your people on it, Jim. I want to know what's going on.
The question is, sir, do we support the new regime or do nothing?
As long as we have a reasonable likelihood that Khan will oppose the communists, I don't think we have any choice but to support him. And issue a statement for the press.
Very well, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Now for the sports news. Northern Dancer, the Canadian Cannonball colt who won the Kentucky Derby, did a repeat performance by winning the Preakness at Pimlico, the second jewel in horse racing's Triple Crown. Northern Dancer is favored for winning the Belmont Stakes in June. Qualifying times at Indianapolis are faster than ever this year, with 15 racers beating the time of last year's winner. This year's Memorial Day Classic Indianapolis 500 promises to be the fastest on record. That's all for sports tonight. Goodbye.
Good to see you, Mr. President. Let me get right to the point. As you know, we have been assisting the South Vietnamese in surgical strikes against the North.
Are these the operations I approved under Covert Ops Plan 34A?
Yes, sir, and we need your approval for an upcoming operation. We are planning to hit radar installations on a series of islands off the North Vietnamese coast in the Tonkin Gulf.
Who would be involved, Jim, and for what purpose?
The operation would serve two purposes. First, if the South Vietnamese patrol boats are detected as they approach the island, they will activate the station's radar and sonar, allowing our destroyers in the Gulf to study their electronic signatures. If they are not detected and the operation succeed, we should be able to take out a few of the stations.
This is a South Vietnamese operation?
Yes, sir. South Vietnamese commandos trained by Navy SEALs. 2 U.S. advisors will accompany the mission.
General, are your people okay with this?
Yes, sir. For security purposes, notice of the raid will not go out to the destroyers unless they observe activity and request information.
Very well. Go ahead, Jim. I want to report on the mission as soon as possible.
Thank you, sir. I'll keep you informed.
Now for the sports news. Tragedy was behind the wheel early in this year's 48th running of the famed Indianapolis 500 race. A spinout at the end of only the second lap caused a chain reaction that killed drivers Dave McDonald and Eddie Sachs. A.J. Foyt went on to win the race after an hour delay with an average speed of 147 miles per hour, 4 miles an hour faster than last year's all-time record. Hopes are rising for Olympic gold as world records are turned in for American track and field athletes at the California Relays. The best bets for a medal are broad jumper Ralph Boston and mile runners Darrell Burleson and Tom O'Hara. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Sir, I have the report on that covert radar installation raid in the Tonkin Gulf you approved.
Go ahead, Jim.
The South Vietnamese patrol boats were detected by radar approaching the island, sir. We couldn't get close enough to land the commandos carrying the explosives.
You told me if that happened, our carriers would be able to collect information on the radar installations. Did they? You told me if that happened, our carriers would be able to collect information on the radar installations. Did they? Any casualties?
None, sir, and no loss of equipment.
Good. Thanks for the report.
On the lighter side of things, Australians have just unveiled their down-under version of the one-manned rocket. Nicknamed the Australian Pogo Stick, this solo rocket can transport a man up to 100 yards in just 17 seconds. The Pogo Stick is being developed for moving troops quickly through rough terrain. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Sir, Congress has just voted down our measure to send combat troops to Vietnam.
Ah, the great 88th strikes again. What happened?
Well, they talked a good story about communism and growing up in the free world, but when it came time for the vote, they didn't think they could sell an escalation to the voters, or didn't want to try in an election year.
The longer and deeper we go into Vietnam, the more uncertain public reaction will become.
Anyway, Congress gave it a few hours of lip service before defeating our proposal with 50 votes to spare.
We'll let this one go. If things go bad, we can always point to the obstructionist opposition.
You're not going to intervene, sir? I thought we were solidly behind expanding the war in Vietnam.
We must choose our battles, Paul. If the situation remains the same, this one has little hope of passage this year. The reality of election year politics dictates it. We can always try again after November.
Very well, sir.
Hello, Mr. President. Hello, Mr. President. We were just discussing the possibility of debates between the presidential candidates, and we don't think there are going to be any during this campaign.
The FCC requires that every candidate be given equal time to present his views. And I mean every candidate, including some kook who advocates disbanding the entire government. The TV stations just can't afford it.
And the only reason you could debate Mr. Nixon in 1960 was because the FCC rules were suspended as an experiment. It doesn't look like that will happen again.
I wouldn't have won without those debates.
Actually, the whole thing works in your favor, Mr. President. In '60, you were running against the Vice President. He was much more well-known than you were. Sharing a stage with him made you appear as equals. Now you don't want to allow anyone to appear equal with you.
Fred's right. You were in the driver's seat for this election. Why allow anyone to appear equal to the president? Besides, what if you were asked about something that could compromise the security of the United States? You'd be forced to lie. Any way you look at it, this works in your favor.
All right, you've convinced me. Let's move on.
That's all we need to discuss, sir.
Good. I'll see you all later.
On the lighter side of things, this year's summer beachwear sports several lines of high-fashion swim hats. Some of the favorites modeled at this resort include the Capri, the Piadora, and the Playtex Beach Bonnet, which dries in seconds. This is what happened in sports today. With victories in the first two Triple Crown races, bets were on Northern Dancer to win the third jewel in the crown. But there was to be no crown sweep at the Belmont Stakes, as Quadrangle beat the favored Northern Dancer. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, I need you to work out your campaign travel itinerary. We need to plan through to the Democratic Convention, which is in Atlantic City at the end of August.
Okay, Ross. Now I'm booked through until the convention. It's Atlantic City or bust.
Atlantic City, here we come. Have a good day, sir. Hello, Mr. President.
Hi, Ross. What's up?
Well, sir, since Congress was unwilling to give you the go-ahead on combat troops in Vietnam, you've dropped considerably in the opinion polls. As a result, I think you should consider increasing your advertising budget.
I don't think that will be necessary, Ross. I'm comfortable with the amount I'm currently spending on advertising, but I do appreciate your quick response to these issues.
It's my pleasure, Mr. President. Have a good day, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here's tonight's top story. On the international news front, the United Nations Security Council convened today in an emergency session. With Turkey and Greece on the brink of a full-fledged war, the UN Council sent both governments a direct appeal for an immediate ceasefire. U.S. Representative Stevenson issued a warning that all hostilities must be stopped, and the resolution passed 9-1. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Sir, we have reports of another bombing, this time in a Saigon movie theater frequented by American servicemen and their families.
Our very presence there makes us targets. How many dead, Paul?
3 dead, sir, and at least 50 injured. There are rumors that one of the dead, a military policeman, was shot in the back of the head.
He saw something. You can bet on it. Who was responsible for the attack?
It looks like they used the same type of mines that took out the 2 servicemen a week ago. If so, we're looking at Viet Cong again.
So, what are our options?
They come at us in Saigon. I say we go at them in Hanoi, tit for tat.
I don't want to get into that. But Paul, issue a statement denouncing these attacks as the work of terrorists. Let's use this opportunity to send another message to Hanoi that we're watching every move.
I'll do it, sir.
Good evening. In our top story, interceptors, fighter aircraft, and other air squadrons are being transferred from the U.S. to advanced Pacific bases in continued precautionary training. As always, political differences faded at home, and leaders of both parties united behind President Kennedy's preparedness and commitment to world peace. And now for our final story. Sergeant Alvin York died today, a hero from Tennessee who remained a modest man to the end of his 76 years. York was the first common soldier to become a national hero, receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor and 50 other decorations. He became a legend in his own time by wiping out an entire German machine gun battalion of 160 men by himself. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, we've got a problem. Mr. President, we've got a problem in Mississippi. 3 young civil rights workers are missing. 2 of the men are white, the other is a Negro. They went to Mississippi to help with a massive student effort to register Negro voters.
That's the Mississippi Summer Project, right?
Yes, it's also referred to as Freedom Summer, and it isn't very popular among whites in Mississippi. They look upon these students coming in from the north as invaders and agitators. The 3 missing men work for CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and they haven't been seen in 2 days. I've just been informed that this story is going to be on the front page of the New York Times tomorrow. The whole country is going to know about this. I think you should take some action.
What's the right thing to do?
You have a few options. One, you can meet with the parents of the missing workers. That would send a message of concern and compassion to the entire country. Two, I can go to Mississippi and meet with the leaders of Freedom Summer. That would also send a message of concern. Third, you can have Van Owen set up a new FBI office in Mississippi to investigate the disappearance. Considering Van Owen's personal feelings toward the civil rights movement, that could be tough, but it would send a message of concern and action. What do you think?
I think I should meet with the parents. That will look good in the papers and won't jeopardize the Senate vote that's coming up on the Civil Rights Bill.
I'll have that meeting set up as soon as possible. I'll speak with you later. Jack, I've just received word of a demonstration at the University of California's Berkeley campus.
What's the issue?
Vietnam. A small but vocal group of students is protesting our involvement over there. They think America should quit fighting other countries' wars.
Well, they have the right to a peaceful demonstration. Too bad they don't understand that fighting other countries' wars is what won us that right.
Yes, Jack, it's a bit disturbing. Do you want to issue any statement on the protest?
Yes. Have Fred put something together questioning their patriotism.
All right, Jack. I'll speak with you later.
And for what's happening in Vietnam, every day more and more Americans become aware of U.S. involvement in the frustrating South Vietnamese struggle. Here, American helicopters transport South Vietnamese troops into new strategic locations as part of a new strategy against communist aggression. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. President, we've got a problem in New York City. Negroes are rioting in Harlem. Apparently, the whole thing started over the shooting of a 15-year-old Negro boy by an off-duty police officer.
What the hell? How am I ever going to get the Senate to pass the Civil Rights Bill if they keep rioting? This isn't making my life any easier. Give me the details.
It's pretty ugly between 125th Street and 139th Street. They're looting stores, breaking windows, and damaging property. There are also people throwing bottles and bricks at the police from the rooftops. The police are mostly firing warning shots, but some of them are shooting at the rooftops as well. What do you think we should do?
It sounds as if this situation is out of control. We'd better send in the National Guard. We can't afford to have this situation escalate. I don't want this to spread to other cities. Get the Guard in there to restore some order.
Certainly, Mr. President. I'll get right on it.
Mr. President, I'd like to update you on the latest public opinion data on Vietnam.
Go ahead.
Even though the motion was defeated in Congress, a majority of voters are behind your proposal to send combat troops to Vietnam.
Do you think the attack on U.S. personnel in Vietnam a couple of weeks ago had anything to do with it?
Probably. In any case, the Vietnam issue is becoming important to a growing number of Americans.
Good. Thanks for the update.
You're welcome, sir.
On the lighter side of things, models arrived in Rome with a femme fashion cargo that is aimed at accenting the new fall blouse styles. When asked about the princess of Italian fashions, one new model said that her blouses have the feel and fit of an expensive shirt at pizza prices. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
It looks like the Republican candidate for president is officially James Decker. He's been nominated by the Republicans at their convention in San Francisco. I can't believe they're actually supporting that guy as a candidate.
I know what you mean, Fred. Decker's views are so conservative, he alienates a lot of people in his own party. But I guess the Republican Party is falling prey to extremism.
Talk about extremism. At the Republican convention, they couldn't even pass a measure denouncing the John Birch Society. That's one of the most fanatical right-wing organizations I can think of, and they support it. Next time, they'll probably have the KKK give the nominating speech.
Could you just imagine that?
This all works in our favor. Defeating Decker will be easy. All the racists can vote for him, and everybody else can vote for me.
That's right. We just have to get past the Democratic convention. Then you should have this election in the bag.
I hope so. Thanks for the update, everyone. I'll speak with you later.
And now for celebrities in the news. Beatlemania continues spreading throughout America as thousands of screaming teenagers greet the quartet as they arrive at New York's Idlewild Airport. The band is so popular that New York City cops are obligated to protect them from crowds of fans outside their New York hotel. The new Beatles hero worship is reminiscent of the heydays of Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley. The Beatles grossed more than $17 million last year alone. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Jim, you wanted to discuss an operation in Vietnam?
Yes, sir. Air America is a subsidiary of the CIA that serves our air transport needs. We want to use Air America to drop South Vietnamese commandos into the jungles to the north, sabotage the bridges on the Ho Chi Minh Trail at Khe Sanh.
Why do we need to use Air America? Why can't the South Vietnamese execute this mission on their own?
The South Vietnamese have demonstrated time and again that they cannot execute air missions without being detected.
Will U.S. personnel participate on the ground, Jim?
No, sir. The CIA plans the operation, but no American will be directly involved with the sabotage effort.
Sir, if the bridges open, the trail will be extended to within 25 miles of Da Nang and to within 200 miles of Saigon. The Communists will increase their capacity to move supplies tenfold.
Okay, Jim. You've got the green light. But keep me informed.
All right, Commander.
Now for today's headline story. On the international news front, the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta became an independent nation after 165 years of British rule. Welcoming Malta into the British Commonwealth, Prince Philip turned the constitutional articles over to Prime Minister Olivier. Malta, which has been a strategic military base since the Phoenicians ruled 35 centuries ago, will now fly a flag of its own for the first time. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
I'm here to brief you on the results of the bridge raid at Khe Sanh.
Fire away, Jim.
Sir, the operation went without a hitch. The South Vietnamese commandos destroyed 3 of the 4 bridges. Only the northernmost bridge is still standing. Traffic on the trail has slowed to foot traffic again.
What about casualties?
2 commandos got tangled up in the trees on the drop. And we assume the group of 4 assigned to the northern bridge was intercepted and eliminated. We never heard from them after the jump.
I see. But overall, the operation was a success?
Yes, it was.
Good. All right, gentlemen. Let's move on. Keep me posted on any new developments.
Now for the sports news. The track and field trials to pick an Olympic team project a bright future for U.S. athletes in Tokyo. Bob Hayes tied the American 100-meter dash record, and Ralph Boston set a new broad jump world record of 27 feet 4 1/4 inches. These are just a couple of the young American amateur athletes that will be digging for gold in Tokyo. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, thanks to a paid informant, the bodies of the 3 civil rights workers that disappeared in Mississippi have been found. The 2 white men were each shot once in the head. The Negro man was beaten and shot 3 times. Then they were all buried under an earthen dam. It took a bulldozer to get them out.
Who's responsible for the murders?
We know the Klan is involved in this. We're just going to have a tough time proving it. You know the state of Mississippi isn't going to charge anyone with murder on this one, so we're going to have to get indictments on federal civil rights charges. As always, a possible conviction is a long way off.
Thanks for the update, Bobby. I'll speak with you later. Hello, everyone. I understand we need to discuss the re-election campaign. So, let's get started.
Mr. President, you need to determine your campaign position on raising taxes. Would you like some background on the issue?
Yes, Sam. I'd like some background before I make my decision.
I'd like to comment on the question of taxes, if I may, sir. As you know, the American people never like to hear that their taxes are going to be increased. I say no matter what you personally feel about the issue, you promise not to raise taxes. Otherwise, you'll never get re-elected.
Don't you think that's a little dishonest, Fred? It seems to me, sir, that if you know you have to raise taxes, then you should tell the people that. Why hide it?
You can't be idealistic when it comes to winning an election, Walter. I'm telling you, sir, the people do not want to hear that their taxes are going to go up if they re-elect you. That's the bottom line.
Hold on a minute. Can we at least discuss why taxes might be raised before we discuss whether I'll raise them or not?
There are a number of pressing urban and suburban concerns, Mr. President. For example, housing discrimination, water systems, and transportation. These all take money.
So the question is, do you want to change these problems? And if you do, how will you pay for them? By raising taxes or cutting spending in other areas? Let's start with the first part. Do you want to change some of the problems Sam listed?
Yes, Bobby, I think those are important issues. They need government attention.
Well then, how do you plan to pay for those changes? By raising taxes or cutting spending in other areas of the government?
It seems to me that I'd have to raise people's taxes to affect those changes.
But like I said before, Mr. President, you don't need to tell people that. Just tell them what they want to hear now, then do what you want later.
I completely disagree with that, Fred. People understand that improvements cost money, Mr. President. They're willing to make the sacrifices. What happened to the idea of ask not what your country can do for you?
I think Walter's right. If you know that you have to raise taxes to make important improvements, be honest about it. The public will appreciate your candor. Do you agree with me, sir?
Yes, I do, Arthur, and that's my decision. My campaign position is that I'm willing to raise taxes to make important improvements in this country.
All right, Mr. President. That's all we needed to discuss.
Good. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Good evening. In our top story, the success of this week's Ranger 7 mission carried the U.S. across new thresholds in space, bringing a landing on the moon even closer. Launched from Cape Canaveral with one of the smoothest takeoffs on record, the Ranger made the 3-day, 240,000-mile trip without a hitch. As designed, Ranger 7 sent back more than 4,000 detailed lunar photographs for scientists to study. And now for celebrities in the news. Sir Winston Churchill officially announced his retirement today, stating that he won't stand for re-election this fall. With a career that spanned 3 major wars, Churchill was the major architect of victory in the defeat of Hitlerism. Churchill, in somewhat frail health, made his last appearance in the House of Commons. He will celebrate his 90th birthday in a couple of months. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, everyone. I know we need to discuss the civil rights legislation, so let's get started.
Mr. President, the Senate vote on that bill is coming up. I've been speaking with various senators from both parties, and I think you've got enough votes to win, but it'll be close. If you're willing to twist a few arms, you could probably ensure victory.
Bobby's right, Mr. President. Why don't you speak with Senator Edwards? She's been very helpful in the past, and she's got enough clout to pick up a few more votes.
I think you should deal with the minority leader, Henry Epler. Even though Democrats make up 67% of the Senate, you can't rely solely on them. For this vote, you're going to need bipartisan support. I think Epler, the Senate Republican leader, could provide some important votes, but it's up to you.
I'll speak with Senator Edwards. I think she can provide me with the necessary votes to ensure victory.
I'd be happy to set that up for you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for your time, gentlemen. That will be all.
Mr. President, I'm afraid the Republicans have started rumblings about your health again. They're trying to scare the American people into believing you're too ill to run the country.
You've got to be kidding me, Bobby. Haven't I proved that I'm well enough? I survived a shooting, for God's sake.
I know. They're willing to say anything to win this election. But I think it's more important to counter these rumors. You've got to make the people believe that you're healthy. Don't you agree?
You're absolutely right, Bobby. What do you suggest I do?
Why don't you have a photographer follow you on a walk in the country with Jackie and the kids? Make it look like you've gone on a long walk. That'll give the appearance of stamina. Or you could have the press cover a family game of football. You know how they love that stuff. That'll make you seem like you're full of energy, raring to go. What do you want to do?
I think the family football game is brilliant, Bobby. Can you have that set up for me?
Of course. I'll get right on it. We'll make the Republicans look like fools for even bringing this up.
Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate it. I'll see you later.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here's tonight's top story. There's a royal welcome to Prince Edward Island as Queen Elizabeth arrives to begin a 9-day tour of Canada. The Queen is in Canada to take part in the centennial celebration of the Confederation. The Royal Yacht Britannia will serve as a floating palace during her 9-day visit to Charlottetown, Ottawa, and Quebec. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Well, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, next week is the Democratic Convention. How do you feel?
I'm very confident, Bobby. I don't think Sharp has a chance.
I couldn't agree more. I know they leave Atlantic City looking forward to a November victory.
You're going to be there with me, aren't you?
Of course. There's going to be a party at the Atlantic City Regency Hotel, and we've set it up so that you've got a private hotel suite, too. That way you can watch the television broadcast away from the crowds if you'd like.
That sounds perfect, Bobby. Look, I've got a lot to do before then, so I'll see you later, okay?
Yeah, I'll see you later.
Mr. President, Senator Edwards is here to see you.
Hello, Mr. President. I figure you're tallying up your votes for the civil rights vote in the Senate. How does it look?
It looks good so far, Josephine. My sources tell me I've got enough to win, but that it's going to be close. That's why I asked you to come by today. I'd like you to employ your best persuasive powers to help me secure some vote.
I'll do my best, Mr. President, but I think I've already done all the persuading I can.
I'm sure you have, Josephine. It's just that this is the final battle, and it's all or nothing. I'd really appreciate it if you would give it all you've got.
Of course, Mr. President. I'll call in every marker I have and a few I don't.
Thanks, and I'll speak with you after we win this one.
And now for our final story. This fall, both cars and movies are being unveiled in Detroit. Hollywood's latest product, The Lively Set with James Darren and Marilyn Maxwell, is a romantic drama with an automotive background. Thus, film producers and celebrities have come to town to preview the new film at the Adams Theater in downtown Detroit. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
President Kennedy has just received enough votes to be nominated to a second term by the Democratic Party. The President will, of course, make his official acceptance speech tomorrow night as scheduled. The crowd at this Atlantic City convention.
Would you listen to that crowd? They love you. I've never seen a Democratic convention this frenzied. Congratulations, John. You did it.
Congratulations again on gaining the nomination, Mr. President. Your hard work on the campaign trail is paying off.
Thank you, Ross. I get the feeling that you're here to discuss more of the campaign trail.
That's right, sir. You've got to decide what you want to say from now until 2 weeks before the election. This is one of the most important times of the campaign, so I've focused a lot of attention on the states with the most electoral votes.
All right, Ross, I'm finished.
Thanks for your time, sir. I'll talk to you again soon.
Honored guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, today we have proven once again that Americans do not step away from the right path just because it is a difficult path. Today, we have taken further steps in our commitment to freedom. Today, we have shown that there is no room in our country for racial intolerance. Today, we have become a better nation. As I sign this bill, I am reminded of the principle that this country was founded on. All men are created equal.
Terrific speech, Mr. President. It's been a long struggle, but it's been worth it. Congratulations, Mr. President. Excellent job. Fantastic speech, sir.
It's a proud day for all Americans.
On the lighter side of things, the Millennium Fashion Show for Men in Cologne, Germany is where European designers unveil what they would like men to wear. This year's fashions range from ruffles to knickers. Casual lounging is a must for every man's wardrobe, and formal should probably include a crowning touch with a derby and formal coat. That's all the news for now, so until tomorrow, good night.
Mr. President, we have confirmed reports of 2 separate attacks on 2 of our destroyers operating in the Tonkin Gulf.
Let's hear about it, Paul.
The USS Maddox was on a surveillance mission about 6 miles off the North Vietnamese coast when it was attacked by 3 North Vietnamese patrol boats. 3 torpedoes were launched from the patrol boats as well as significant small arms fire. 2 torpedoes missed. The 3rd struck the Maddox but didn't detonate. There were no U.S. casualties.
Did the Maddox in any way provoke the attacks, Paul?
The facts of the incident are still being collected, but it doesn't appear so. South Vietnamese patrol boats were engaged in a raid on the coast, sir. Although the Maddox was aware of the operation, she had no part in it.
Okay, go on.
The Maddox called for air support from the Ticonderoga. 4 Crusaders responded, crippling 2 boats. The Maddox hit the 3rd. None of the 3 were sunk, and the Maddox retreated further into international waters.
Was the Maddox inside Vietnamese waters at the time of the attack?
Vietnam has never specified its limit. The standard demarcation is 3 miles, sir, although China observes a 12-mile limit.
They'll undoubtedly argue that the attack was justified by a trespass. What sort of operation was the Maddox engaged in?
Her crew was gathering North Vietnamese radar and sonar intelligence.
You mentioned there were 2 attacks.
The second incident occurred in darkness. There are some questions as to whether anything actually happened at all. Although both the Maddox and the Turner Joy fired, we have no confirmed sightings of enemy patrol boats.
All right, gentlemen. Give me our options.
Sir, this is the opportunity we have been looking for to justify an expansion of our role in South Vietnam.
That's right, sir. They fired the first shot.
Paul, it's time to send combat troops over there. We'll need congressional approval for that. Pull together a proposal.
Right away, sir.
Thanks for your time, gentlemen.
"18-year-old Don Scholander set a new record to capture the men's 100-meter freestyle swimming gold medal. In the men's 200-meter backstroke, it's a 1-2-3 medal sweep for the U.S. teams Jed Graeff, Gary Dilley, and Bob Bennett. Adding these medals, the U.S. continues to hold a commanding Olympic lead at the Tokyo Summer Games. That's all for sports tonight. Goodbye.
Mr. President, the Secret Service has received reports that there will be another attempt on your life in California. I strongly suggest that you don't go on your campaign tour there. What do you want to do?
I'm definitely not going. There's no point in risking my life again. Thanks for the information.
Of course, sir. That's what I'm here for.
Mr. President, Gordon Tompkins at the FBI is here to see you.
Hello, Mr. President. How are you today?
I'm fine, Gordon. Have you got some, good news for me?
I'm afraid not, sir. We have a lead on another attempt on your life. A guy by the name of, the Tin Man has been in touch with an undercover agent. The Tin Man thinks this agent is an ex-con who can put him in touch with an assassin.
Who is this Tin Man?
We haven't found out exactly who he is yet, but we did trace a call from him to our undercover agent, and the call came from the White House, sir.
Are you sure? I can't believe that one of my own people would do this.
I understand how you feel, sir. We're looking into all the people who were working the night the call was made. Would you like a list of the employees?
Yes, I would like to see that list.
We'll get that list to you right away, sir. Goodbye.
Gordon Tompkins asked me to give you this. It's the list of all the employees who were working late last night. They're all here now. Do you want to speak to any of them?
Absolutely.
Fine. Who would you like to see first?
Send in Tate.
No problem.
You wanted to see me, sir?
Yes, Jennifer. I, understand you were working late last night.
Yes, I was, sir. I was finishing up a report on the latest findings about cigarettes leading to cancer.
Do you know anything about the Tin Man?
Tin Man? I'm afraid not, sir.
Thank you for your time, Jennifer. That will be all.
Yes, Mr. President. Would you like to see someone else?
Send in Montero.
Certainly, sir.
Did you want to speak with me, Mr. President?
Carolyn, what kept you here so late last night?
I was doing some research on Hoffa and the Teamsters for the Attorney General.
Did you, see anyone else in the building?
Well, I ran into Mr. Nelson, your Chief of Staff, while I was getting a cup of coffee, but that's about it.
That's all I have to ask you, Carolyn. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Would you like to see someone else?
No thanks.
All right.
And now for what's happening on the new entertainment scene. When the quartet with hair like unmade beds land in the Netherlands, it's the same old story as Britain and the U.S. The teenagers take over. Beatlemania has ceased to be a phenomena and seems to have become a way of life. Only the Queen has perhaps had a more triumphant appearance in Holland. To say that the fans get carried away is to put it mildly. The Beatles concerts sell out in hours, regardless of what city the band plays in. So until tomorrow, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, Jack. Who's responsible for the shooting?
Frank Finn.
Is that his real name?
No, that's an alias.
What's his real name?
Robert Rapkin.
Why did he do it?
For money.
Is anyone else involved?
Yes. Samuel Nelson.
Is that his real name?
Yes, as far as I know.
Why did he do it?
For love.
Is anyone else involved?
No.
Can you prove this, or is it mere suspicion?
I can prove this, Bobby.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you have a strong case. Would you like me to get an arrest warrant?
Definitely.
I'll get right on it.
Great news, Mr. President. Based on your allegations, we took Sam Nelson into custody, and within a half hour, he confessed to everything. You're not going to believe this, but the guy's a nutcase. We taped the confession. Let me play it for you.
I love Jackie. I hated Jack because his infidelity hurt Jackie so much. I only wanted her to be happy. I know that she'd be happier without Jack. Maybe she would even be with me. She would even come to care for me. Once she saw how much I love her, how I am completely devoted to her, I knew that I had to get rid of Jack. So I looked in the FBI files and found my killer. I can't believe that damn camel screwed everything up. Don't get me started! Where was I? Oh yes! This is the good part. I planned the trip to Dallas. It would have worked. What was the point of all my meticulous planning? All those details.
Can you believe that guy? He seemed so normal. Anyway, I've got a lot of paperwork to do on this one. Good day, sir.
Congratulations, Mr. President. You did it. Your undercover work put the right man behind bars. At least one of the right men. He's sitting in a jail cell right now. The word is that he's waiting for Jackie to visit him. What a nutcase. All the other suspects have been cleared except the camel, who hasn't been found. A man matching his description was spotted in an airport in Buenos Aires not too long ago. I'm afraid this may be one mercenary that's never captured.
That's okay. At least we got rid of the real problem, Nelson. He must be deranged. I can't believe I let that madman advise me on important issues.
I was thinking that as long as the people are so excited about your expert investigative accomplishments, you might as well indulge them a little. Why not hold a press conference where you answer some questions about the whole thing? I think it could really increase your popularity. What do you say?
That sounds like a great idea. With the election coming up, I can always use an increase in my popularity.
Fantastic. I'll have it all set up. Anyway, I think you did a terrific job figuring this one out. Well, I'll let you get back to work.
Why did Sam Nelson go by the name the Tin Man?
His initials are SN, and that is the abbreviation for tin in the periodic table of the elements.
Why is the camel called the camel?
I am unable to answer that question at this time.
What does juggernaut mean?
The Juggernaut is a bar in Dallas, where Nelson and the camel met and discussed the assassination attempt.
Why was Strachan killed?
He was investigating the assassination attempt, and I guess he got a little too close for comfort.
The quick emergence of the helicopter as a weapon is giving pilots the ability to maneuver like they never dreamed of. Now able to dodge and dart below tree level, copters can quickly emerge from cover and sail away. Army authorities feel that this hedge-hopping idea will enable them to move the foot soldier with greater speed. New copter machine guns also increase the firepower tremendously. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Mr. President, I thought you'd like to hear the latest public opinion numbers on Vietnam.
Yes, I'm very concerned with that right now.
The recent events in the Tonkin Gulf have galvanized public opinion. They are responding with the typical cowboy mentality. Over 75% of the voters are behind your decision to send combat troops to Vietnam.
Good to hear. We're going to defeat the communists. Thanks, Carolyn.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. President, the National Education Association is putting pressure on us to take a stand on what it sees as an education problem in our country.
The NEA, huh? What do they want?
The NEA says that this country needs higher wages for educators and more money for better schools. Basically, they want to know if you support their agenda.
This is a pretty powerful group, Mr. President. Having them on your side can mean a lot of votes come November. Then again, more money for schools and teachers' salaries has to come from somewhere. It's a tough choice. What do you think? Do you want to support their agenda?
Yes, I support their ideas. Fred, let the NEA know that I'm behind them 100%.
I'll get right on that, Mr. President.
Good. Thanks, Fred. That's all I have time for now. Thanks for your time.
And now for what's happening on the new entertainment scene. More than 12,000 young Britons await the return home of their new heroes. As the Beatles arrive at the London airport, fresh from their triumphant appearance in the U.S., the crowds roar with jubilee. Originating from a small-time act out of Liverpool, the Beatles are now the kingpins of the teenage set without rival. Beatlemania is driving the teen crowds crazy. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Mr. President, we need to update your campaign budget. We've had a huge influx of funds since the convention, as we had expected. Now, with the election so close, you'll probably want to conduct a media blitz and step up security. But, of course, it's up to you.
Okay, Ross. I've worked everything out. Thanks for coming by.
You're welcome, sir. Goodbye.
Chief, I need you to sign off on a memorandum I left in your file folder.
What's it about, Eric?
The Pentagon needs a definitive number on how many combat troops you want to commit to Vietnam. The recommendation is in the memo.
There. I've made my decision, Eric. Send it through, and we'll work on getting congressional approval.
I'll do it, sir.
This is what happened in sports today. After winning the National League pennant by a nose, the St. Louis Cardinals take on the Yankees in the World Series as Yankee pitcher Whitey Ford goes against Ray Sadecki in the opening game. The Yankees are the bidding favorites. A capacity crowd of 75,000 spectators watched the opening ceremonies of the 18th Modern Olympics in Japan's National Stadium. Athletes will compete in more than 20 different sporting events as the Olympic Games are held in the Far East for the first time ever. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Mr. President, there's been some developments in Russia. You're wanted in the cabinet room right away.
Thanks, Sean. I'm on my way.
Mr. President.
Thanks, Sean. I'm on my way.
Mr. President.
Why do you think he was ousted?
There are two main reasons. First, there's been considerable opposition to Levchenko's plan to shift some of his country's economic resources from heavy industry and armaments to consumer goods. Second, Communist China has asked for his removal for months because Levchenko's been trying to have China suspended from the world communist movement.
Who's in charge now?
It's a little unclear right now who the top man is exactly, but there are two men in the forefront. Ivan Borzenko has been named the first secretary of the Communist Party, and Leonid Karamazov is the new Soviet premier. The position of First Secretary is more powerful, so I'd say Borzenko is the most prominent figure in the new leadership.
Is there anything else you can tell me?
There is one last thing, Mr. President. The Soviet ambassador to the U.S. has expressed that his government will continue a policy of peaceful coexistence with us. Would you like to respond to his communication?
Oh, yes, of course. Tell him that I want to continue to work toward world peace or something like that. Use your best judgment.
Certainly, sir.
Thanks, Arthur. This meeting is adjourned.
Good evening. In our top story, the Russian premier closed an era of communist Russia today with his resignation as the top Russian leader. This most widely traveled Soviet leader met with communist leaders like Mao Zedong and wooed other leaders like Nasser of the neutralist nations. New Soviet leaders will split the responsibilities of this top job between themselves. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Well, this is it, Mr. President. This is the last time you're going to make campaign speech plans. You've only got 2 more weeks before the election. What do you want to say?
That's all set, Ross. Thanks for all your hard work during this campaign. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Mr. President. I'm looking forward to your victory speech on November 3rd. I'm sure this election is going to be a landslide.
That's what I like to hear. I'll speak with you later, Ross.
Have a good day, Mr. President.
Now for the sports news. The St. Louis Cardinals, led by the superb pitching of Bob Gibson, captured the 7th and deciding game of the World Series. The home run war continued as Mickey Mantle hit one to the opposite field with 2 men on, followed by Ken Boyer's second winning grand slam of the series. St. Louis won the thrilling Fall Classic with a final score of 7-5, the first time for the Cards since 1946. The United States won 3 more gold medals in the Summer Olympic Games. Winning the 100-meter butterfly brought 15-year-old swimmer Sharon Stouter her 3rd gold medal. Track and field golds went to Bob Hayes with a 10-second flat 100-meter dash and Wyomia Tyrus with a new Olympic record in the women's 100-meter dash. That's all for tonight's news, but remember, same time, same place, and same station tomorrow.
Hi, Jack. Just thought I'd drop by to give you a few words of encouragement for the last leg of the race. How are you holding up?
I'm doing well, Bobby. I feel confident. I know that I've done everything I can to win this election. And next week, we'll know how this whole thing turns out.
I already know how this whole thing turns out. 4 more years.
I hope you're right, Bobby. I really hope you're right.
Are you kidding? I know I'm right. Now I've got to go, but you know I'll be there to celebrate your victory on election night.
Thanks, Bobby. Goodbye.
Mr. President. Mr. President, the vote on sending combat troops to Vietnam is coming up in Congress. In terms of support, we're not quite there yet. There are a couple of groups of congressmen that we need to get over to our side.
Okay, let's go about this the simple way. Fred, Who's likely to hold sway over the congressman?
I'd talk to Senator Quigley first, sir. He's sympathetic to our cause and he has the respect of the younger members.
I don't know about Quigley, sir. He left us standing at the altar with the tax bill.
Yes, he did. But he lined up the votes we needed before he jumped. Who else?
There's Senator Epler. He's more of a political wild card, but he can round up the votes, no doubt about it.
Sir, I don't see why we couldn't talk to both.
Good point, Fred. Set it up, will you?
Of course, Mr. President.
One of the most precious privileges in the world today is the right to vote, to choose the man that will head the most powerful nation in the world during the next 4 years. The candidates have been named. The choice is yours. In the 1960 presidential election, more than 1/3 of the eligible voters did not go to the polls. Only about 100,000 votes out of 69 million made the difference between victory and defeat, so no one can say that his vote doesn't count. For one vote could certainly help change the face of history. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
How are you, Bobby?
Jack,
Where's
it's
Teddy
still early,
hiding?
but I think this is going to be a landslide.
Another glass of champagne, dear?
President Kennedy is leading Mr. Decker by 11% of the popular vote.
I can't believe this.
Uncle Johnny! Uncle Johnny! Give me a picture!
Well, you know my motto. Vote early and vote often.
President Kennedy has defeated Mr. Decker to win a second term in office.
Jack, you really put it to him in this campaign. The American people have validated your first term. They really love you.
Yay, Daddy!
Congratulations!
I guess I better start thinking about what I'll wear to the inaugural ball.
Today, we have proven, once again, that Americans do not step away from the right path just because it is a difficult path. Today,